Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be combining everything that we've learned so far in this course into some example charts.
Hi, I'm Charlie Starr. The video you are about to watch is part of my free course, How to Read a Birth Chart. And now, back to this video.
This is probably going to be a really long video, and I could have broken it up into different chunks, but I was just so tempted to keep it into one long video and just give you a bunch of different examples and allow you to come back and watch at your own pace where you left off, because this video is going to be dropping on the last day of 2022 and I just could not pass up the opportunity to end the course on the last day of the year. So I will definitely timestamp each of the example charts for you guys in case this is too long for you to get through in one sitting. But I'm excited because this video is basically the culmination of everything we've learned so far, and we're going to be able to put everything that we've learned in little chunks of what does this mean, what does that mean in the chart, all together, so that you guys can see how these things sort of synthesize and come together in a chart, and why it is so valuable to be able to do this skill of integrating everything collectively. Is something that I'm still learning. You guys will still be learning when you start to interpret charts for yourself and for other people. The more that you interpret charts for other people, the more you're going to learn about this. I definitely recommend asking people for feedback on your interpretations. A lot of time with my friends, I'll take a look at their chart and I'll think okay, this, I'm, for example, their Venus placement and in their chart, combining everything together, it looks like, their needs in relationships are XYZ, but then I'll ask them and have a conversation with them about it. And of course, most of my friends are more than happy. They love psychologically analyzing things. So they're more than happy to dive into that topic with me and be oh, this is actually kind of what I feel I need in a relationship. And I'll share with them kind of the symbolism of what I'm seeing in their chart. And they're generally, because it's their chart, even though they don't have all the astrology knowledge that I do, just giving them those pieces kind of allows them to work through okay, what is this symbolizing and what is this pulling out as important that maybe I didn't see from the beginning, right away. It's kind of oh yeah, I recognize that this is important for me, but I didn't realize how important maybe it is. And it kind of brings something from the subconscious into the conscious and allows them to become more self-aware. But it's usually a process that involves both of us. It's me bringing the topic up and then that person sort of assimilating and integrating that information. But it's not just they're taking that information from me and saying oh, okay, well, this is the interpretation, so I guess that's what it is. It's kind of a collaborative process. And in that process, my friend, whoever it is, will get to know themselves better, but it also allows me to understand that placement better, as well as understand my friend better. So it's a really fun tool to get to know other people and also help other people get to know themselves better. So that is always a continuing process. And that person whose chart it is really going to be able to fill in the gaps where you didn't see it. So if you're seeing how something is archetypally true, or it's saying this or that, the other, your friend is going to be able to specify it. They'll be yes, it's this, but it's not in this way, it's in this other way. So that will help you understand as well the placement, because ultimately when you are just reading a placement for somebody, you are making an educated guess about how something is manifesting in their life and how exactly it's being experienced. So bringing that topic up, it's kind of you have a level of authority, but then that other person has a level of authority from being that person and having those experiences. So they're going to be able to identify as using what you know as a jumping point. They're going to be able to identify where and how that's exactly expressing itself. And I'll give some examples of this as we go through the example charts, but maybe just a quick example of what I'm talking about is Saturn. We've already talked about what Saturn represents, and Saturn can represent and act in different ways. It can represent delays, it can represent longevity, it can represent age, it can represent blockages, right? And so when you have, say for example, Saturn opposing Venus in a chart, or Saturn in the 7th house, you might make some sort of guess oh, this person might have to wait a long time before they find a partner, Or, you know, is Saturn saying no to the topic of love? Or is Saturn delaying the topic of love? That kind of thing. Or, you know, so you know, you might be able to make like an educated guess like that, and then you go and talk to that person, and that person is like, well, actually, like basically what it is like my partner's a lot older than me, and we've been together for a really long time. So it's like longevity in that type of expression, right? And that can change over time as well. So it can be like somebody's had a really difficult time finding a partner, and maybe they were single for a longer time than their peers, but ultimately they ended up with somebody, and then that relationship lasted for a really long time. So it can, you know, manifest itself in multiple ways. It can also be that this person doesn't want to be in a relationship. So Saturn is saying no to the topic of partnerships, and so like, and that's expressing a desire that person has, and so that person is kind of agreeing with that aspect and saying like, you know, this, I don't think that this is really for me, this whole like being with another person thing. So that person, like once you bring up that aspect and talk about like the different ways that it can express, that person is going to be able to, like I said, fill in the gaps and tell you how this aspect is manifesting. And from there, you can have a conversation about like different ways that this can play out over time, which can then help that person. And the other thing I would like to say about the chart is that what's interesting about the chart is that the chart is stagnant. You get the chart when you're born, and that chart represents you, but you grow over time. So that's another thing that I've seen, where some of the more challenging parts of a chart seem like these huge obstacles, but if I'm sitting down and reading a chart for somebody who's, say, in their 40s, and they've done a lot of work on themselves, and they've worked through a lot of these challenges and blockages, sometimes when I bring up some of the more challenging aspects of the chart, it will resonate with the person, but it will be something that's kind of already resolved. And then that part of the chart is able, generally at that point, is able to take on a more positive expression in their lives. So people evolve, people change, and that is definitely something that you can see when you start reading for other people. When I'm reading a chart spontaneously, I don't have time to like sit down and like read everything in the chart as a collective. I've noticed that following my intuition is really interesting, because generally the things that pop out to me when I first just glance at a chart are usually the topics that are like very central to what the person is experiencing currently. So it definitely is an art form, interpreting charts, looking at charts, the things that pop out to you, the things that says to you. It's a combination of a collaboration of prior knowledge, and also using your intuition in the moment with that person to see like what is relevant, what are the things that need to be pulled from the chart at this moment to help the client or like help your friend process whatever it is that they're processing at the moment. So let's jump into a few example charts. Okay, so for our first example, we have the anonymous chart of a 24-year-old woman. This person has given me consent to share information on their chart. So there's a couple different approaches as to what gets looked at first in the chart. I'm going to walk you through my typical approach. And I think it's kind of a good idea to sort of have a standard approach or a standard like method when you're first learning how to read the birth charts. And then what you'll find is that different charts, like your eyes will immediately be drawn to certain things. So the first thing that I always look at is the rising sign, the ascendant. I think this is a really important starting point, because this tells us who the chart ruler is. This also describes for us the characteristics of like what this person perceives in the world, how they perceive their environment, and what is the filter that they are wearing. Like what are the sunglasses? Because the rest of the chart is going to describe the subjective experience of the person whose chart this is. And so we want to get an important understanding of what lens they're seeing their experiences through. So this person has Scorpio as their rising sign. We also have Chiron here. Chiron is the planet of unhealed wounds, but it's also the healer. To me, this just amplifies the healing and trauma aspects of Scorpio, which Scorpio already has an association to those topics. So this just like further amplifies this topic in this person's life, and the fact that for most Scorpio risings, they have been through, and it's buried somewhere in their subconscious, they've been through traumatic experiences in the past. They are not as likely to trust people. Mars is their chart ruler, so they tend to be very strong, very passionate people. They tend to face their problems head on. They tend to be very aware of power dynamics. They tend to be always looking for the underlying truth. So like I said, with the not immediately trusting what's immediately presented to them. This is not a gullible sign. This is a sign that is doing its own detective work about what it perceives in its environment. So this person definitely has that. With Chiron here, this person is also definitely involved in like healing other people, and how they're going to heal people, right? This is going to be in a very Martian way. It's Mars is their chart ruler, so this is the ascendant we've been looking at, and then here's Chiron right inside, right there. So that's what I've been talking about, and then we want to look at who is their chart ruler. So we have Mars is their chart ruler. We have Mars in Aries, which is a good sign for Mars. It's in the 6th house, which is kind of like a difficult house, but we'll get into that later, because immediately what jumped out to me the first time that I looked at this chart, it was like you're looking at the chart ruler and you see it's at 22 degrees of Aries, but it's in conjunction with Saturn. So this is pretty crazy, which is then also in conjunction with Mercury, which is then also, here's their sun. So there's this huge stellium in Aries in their 6th house, which is super important, and immediately like starts to distract me and take me out of like the typical pattern of things that I'm going to look at, because you see that and you're like immediately like, whoa, like this person has both of their malefics, both Mars and Saturn in conjunction with each other. That's pretty intense, and Mars is already like the most intense planet. So this is a very intense chart to begin with. And then we look at the next thing, like before I start to get distracted with trying to interpret the malefics, we want to look at this person's moon sign and also this person's sun sign, and then go from there. So this person's sun is in Aries, because also we have Mercury here. This person's very true to the Aries energy, where we could anticipate that this person has a very direct communication style. This person is upfront. Okay, so this person is not, they're not wishy-washy. They might have very strong opinions about things, but you know, they're not going to be the person that like is talking behind your back and lying to your face. Like this person is going to be very honest and upfront. Like what you see is what you get with their personality. That is what I found to be very true to the Aries personality. We also have to take into account that this is happening in their 6th house. So when we were going through the career houses, we were talking about, so the career houses are the 2nd house, the 6th house, and then the 10th house. And this person also has their midheaven in their 10th house. So that just further reinforces the 10th house as a career point. But they have fire here, and the fire signs are very ambitious, very driven, prone to like really taking a lot of initiative in their lives, and just putting a lot of energy into this topic of this person's life. So this definitely is true, because not only do they have the fire signs here, but they have their sun in one of the career houses, and then they have a whole freaking stellium of planets in their career houses. So this immediately tells me that the topic of career is extremely important in this person's life. Okay, so we can see that just based off of like the placement. Also with the 6th house, this is the house of service, and this is also the house of health and our day-to-day habits, like the lifestyle decisions that we make and how they impact us. So I can tell that this is going to be like a major theme or major topic for this person. Having the sun in the 6th house is difficult. Having their sun in a sign that's very like egocentric, such as Leo and Aries, it's kind of like this person not only has a lot of energy for their career, but they also need a lot of recognition, and they need to be able to take a lot of initiative in what they're doing. And so the 6th house is a difficult placement, because the 6th house is a lot of toil, a lot of work, and like not getting a lot of recognition. Like it's below the horizon, so it's not very visible to other people. So it's kind of like gives you the energy of like somebody who's putting in a lot of work, putting in a lot of effort, and they have like leadership qualities, but they're not necessarily always getting put in place where they have that they're getting like the recognition that they really need or that they really deserve. The other thing too is that the topic of health can be like very stressful. Like it can be something that they're constantly trying to work on the routine. Aries here, similar to like Leo or possibly even Sagittarius here. It's difficult to like get into like a regular routine, which is sort of like the expected for today's environment, is that the way to build like good habits or good patterns in your life is just by like falling into a consistent routine. And it is very hard for like somebody with a fire sign in their sixth house with their sun here, kind of like struggles with those topics. So that's what we see. That's what I immediately notice with the sun sign. And then let's look at the moon sign. So then the moon is in the sign of Cancer. So the moon does well in the sign of Cancer because that's her domicile. So the moon rules the sign of Cancer. So this is kind of like a good placement. By the way, the sun in Aries is also a good placement as far as like the sign for the sun, because this is like a strong position for the ego. As far as the sun, it's really only the house that's difficult. And then we have the moon in Cancer is in the ninth house, so this has to do with personal growth, and this has to do with where we go to become more than what we are. Their emotions basically have like a lot to teach them. And whenever you have like a water placement here, it's like really good for this person to like go beneath the surface, like internally, and learn about topics of the self, which then helps them learn more about the world around them. And we see that with this placement. And the other thing too that the moon talks about is like this is our receptive center, right? So this person really needs to be in relationships with other people or situations that provide like a huge amount of emotional stability. Cancer is a sign that's connected with security, nourishment, resources, like having a safe space. And so this person really like strongly like needs a place where they are able to like have a safe haven where they can like freely express themselves and their emotions, where they can not be, you know, like when we're starting to combine it with like the rising sign here, where it's like this person has been through a lot. They've possibly been betrayed by people. They've possibly been, you know, hurt by different things in their lives. And so it's really, very important on like an emotional health basis that they have stability, that they have emotional security, that they have safety in their lives. This is kind of like reinforced by the Aries sun and the fact that their Mars is in Aries. And also, you know, we also have Saturn in Aries. So how is this person getting their safety? Then we start to look at other placements in their life. So we have, how is this person getting their safety? So is that going to be through relationships? Is that going to be through career? Like the moon typically talks about like just what is needed emotionally. This is an important planet to look at when it comes to relationships. So let's start there. So we have relationships. This person, the things we look at for the relationship, the first thing that I look at is the seventh house. This is the house of significant relationships. We're also going to look at the fifth house because this is the house of dating and sex. And then we're also going to be looking at Venus, and we're also going to be looking at Mars. And then the other thing that I like to look at when it comes to like relationships is Black Moon Lilith, which is kind of pivotal in this person's chart because there's this huge opposition from their stellium in Aries to Black Moon Lilith. So let's take a look at all this together. So first of all, we have, in the fifth house, we have Pisces, and this is also the sign of Jupiter. So my interpretation of that would be from a standpoint of analyzing what this person needs like in a relationship. It would be like they may be attracted to like people who are very spiritual. They may be attracted to people who have substance abuse issues. Honestly, they are probably very interested in anybody who has completely different or like abnormal perspective on reality. These are all like Pisces things. So basically Pisces, emphasized by Jupiter, who's the ruler of Pisces, is increasing this energy and increasing this sort of like Pisces Jupiter symbolism of like the type of person that they're attracted to. Sometimes this can like even describe like that they're attracted to people that are really tall or have like a huge presence. Jupiter is the teacher. Jupiter is also the traveler. So it's kind of like also these things too. And then we have in the fifth house, we have Taurus. Now Taurus is Venus's sign, and this is once again similar to the moon sign. This has to do with stability. This has to do with resources. This has to do with safety based on somebody who's consistent and dependent and reliable. So once again, we kind of see something reinforcing what we saw with the moon sign with like the need for security and stability. And then let's look at the Venus sign. So what is this person attracting? So Aquarius is an interesting placement for Venus Venus is, what this person is attracting in a relationship. And what this person, this also says something too about what the person needs in a relationship, and what the person finds kind of like opens them up really in a relationship. So we talked about like what, we talked about them needing some security, but what does that look like for this person? Aquarius is a sign that has to do with boundaries. It has to do with freedom. It's ruled by Saturn, and its modern ruler is Uranus. And Uranus is a planet. Uranus is actually right here in its own sign, but it's kind of like, I mean, this is the planet that is rebellious. It like breaks free from traditional norms. And also Aquarius is a sign that creates a lot of boundaries between people. And so what this person needs, like immediately when I look at this person's Venus in Aquarius, I see like, well, this person really needs a lot of freedom. They need like a lot of autonomy. So yeah, they need a lot of security in their relationship, but what does that security actually look like for them? What is it in the relationship that signals to them that they're in a safe situation? And that is when they have their own space, when they have their own freedom, when they're able to make a lot of autonomous decisions for themselves, when they're not feeling tied or bound by another person or to another person in any sort of like restrictive way. They may also, what that may look like for this person might not be traditional. It might be an unconventional relationship, but that's actually what they really need in order to like get that security, but also get what they need in the relationship, which is a high level of individuality. We see a high level of individuality needed in the sign of Aries as well. So Aries is not a codependent sign. Aries is a sign of the individual and the will and the one singular person. So this is, this is going to be the chart of a person who has a lot of individual will, really good at, or it's really important for this person to be free to be an individual and be the person that they need to be. And so then when we look at Black Moon Lilith talks about, it describes in the chart, right? Like this is what part of this person has had to like flee the scene because of what they were told about gender stereotypes and gender norms growing up. So this person is a woman and they were raised as a woman. And so to have Black Moon Lilith in the 12th house, this was a conversation I had with them just recently, was really to the point of, and the sign here is Libra, was like, that the goal, they were kind of like taught that like the goal growing up was like to be in a relationship and to like essentially like it wasn't really an option for her to be alone. Like it wasn't really an option for her to like have that individuality. And so this became like kind of like a painful point, like a painful lesson, because obviously this person has a huge need for individuality and a huge need for autonomy, but like they were told basically that they couldn't be alone, that they kind of like had to have a man in order to complete them. We see this in opposition to the sun, and we can kind of understand like why that is. Like, oh yeah, of course, this sort of like teaching would be in opposition to the sun and in Aries, because it's saying like, who cares what you need? You're here to complete a man, So even though they're only 24, they actually already have a successful career, and they already like they literally could be doing that for like life if they wanted to, but because of all the ambition, all the energy in the career houses that this person has, they're like constantly setting goals. Goals is definitely like an Aries topic, and this person has Aries in spades, and they are always setting goals for themselves, and those are like fitness goals. This person really likes to work out really intensely, which is also true to like the like sort of intense fiery passion of like Aries, and them having Mars in Aries in the 6th house of health and work really makes sense to me, that this person like really feels like very empowered by like weightlifting and intensely working out in the gym. They also have like a huge amount of goals for their career. So they are by no means done with their career aspirations. I'm excited to see like what this person ends up doing in life. It's probably going to be a bunch of different things, because that's the nature of the fire signs, is that they must constantly be being stimulated, and they must constantly be setting new goals for themselves, and they also need to get recognition and freedom. And so that and because of the Martian energy of this person, there is like a tendency to like, when things aren't working out and things aren't great, to just kind of like quit and move on to the thing that serves them, which is like a strength and a weakness, because which is probably why it's right here in conjunction with Saturn, because, you know, Saturn is trying to teach you the rewards of like doing things long term and doing things consistently. That's one of the things that Saturn tries to teach people, but it's difficult here having like Mars in conjunction, because like one thing that a lot of people need to learn in life is how to like leave bad situations and expect more, and not become complacent. Anybody with Leo in their 10th house, they really need a lot of I mean, it's just kind of reinforcing the fact they really just need like a lot of recognition. They probably need to be like more representative of what they're doing. So like the job that this person has right now, the career that they have, it's a really good career, but they just don't get like a lot of recognition for it. And they don't really get to like make a lot of decisions. This is a healthcare career, and so there's a lot of restrictions with healthcare. And if you know, you basically have to follow like all these protocols that are in place, which are in place for a reason, but at the same time, if you're not the doctor, if you're not the one like calling all the shots, sometimes you just basically get shit on all the time, like, excuse my language. But it's just kind of be a really difficult position for somebody with who's a fire sign that has their sun in the 6th, when they really need a lot more recognition and a lot more decision making abilities to be given to them. So they have their North Node in Virgo in the 11th house. So this is an interesting placement because Virgo tends to be like an isolated sign, but the 11th house is like where we associate with groups. So this is a thing that like I haven't really talked too much about this person with North Node being in Virgo. We have talked a lot about their South Node being in Pisces. So South Node being in Pisces, also with Jupiter here, this person has had friends with like substance abuse issues, and that has like gotten them involved with like drinking heavily and things of that nature, which they've since moved away from. But it's just kind of like emphasizing like the impact of like recreation and the association with drugs that Pisces has here, as well as like this is the person's South Node, so this may be an energy that they are familiar with from past life experiences. And then where they're moving towards now is Virgo, and they actually are moving into a more isolated part of their life right now. So I think that is them kind of like moving away from their South Node and moving into their North Node in some way, shape, or form, where it's kind of like they have undergone like a letting go of a particular group of friends, which like, you know, groups of friends is 11th house topic over here. And they're kind of like allowing themselves to like go through like a metamorphic experience of like discovering who they are and what their needs actually are, which is like a great thing to do in your 20s. It's a great thing to do anytime, but it's just kind of like important. So anyway, they're kind of like going through that process, but the sign here, this is a service-oriented person, because Virgo is also the sign of service, and because of the stellium that they have in their 6th house of service, this person is very service-oriented. But like Virgo again is the sign of analysis, and so they're kind of like moving into the skill of like being able to like be a little bit more cold and detached, because this is an earth sign ruled by an air planet. There's like no fire here in this situation. It's very it's trying to be as objective as possible, and it's trying to be like rational. It's trying to be like analytically thinking about things and, you know, applying like practical approaches. That's what Virgo is really all about. It's moving away from this sort of like meta, massively big picture sort of perspective on life, and moving more into practicality and moving more into your own body. So like getting into your own body, that's another thing that I see with this chart. It's like, you know, this can be like escapism energy, like moving like basically like with Pisces, there can be like a tendency to escape things. With this person's like South Node being in the and being in Pisces, it's kind of like there can be like a comfortability with like escaping, or kind of having what's the term, like it's not really out of body experience, disassociation. Yes, exactly, disassociation. Whereas Virgo is like incredibly grounded in the body, and it's very much paying attention to the body's signals and what's going on. This is further emphasized by the fact that this is the 6th house, and the 6th house also has to do with health and the issues of the body. So health is not like it's not really a huge topic for this person on a personal level. It's more of an issue or a topic for them in their career, but we could possibly expect this person as they get older for the topic of health to become incredibly important on a personal level, because it is also the North Node. The other thing here is that even though the job that they have in health care is not really serving their needs at the moment, they could potentially stay in healthcare in some other way, shape, or form, because it is supported by this North Node in Virgo, but they would have to do so in a way that like met their other needs. So lastly, we need to talk about this person's malefics and their benefics. They're born at night because their sun is below the horizon right here, and so that means they have a night chart. Excuse me, which means that Saturn is going to be their most difficult malefic. However, in this case, their malefics are in an exact conjunction, so they will be experiencing most likely their malefic parts of life together or simultaneously. And then their greatest benefic is going to be Venus. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. Venus is not aspecting anything. That's what I find the most interesting about about this. There's nothing. This is the little hash mark for Venus, and it's really just not aspecting anything else in the chart. So the person in the whose chart this is currently single, and with all of the eclipses that have been happening in Taurus, their 7th house, they've been undergoing some a lot of evaluation, a lot of focus when it comes to relationships, both of a friendship and romantic nature. So they, right now, if it seems like, oh, are they ever gonna like not be alone? They've stayed pretty true to themselves as a person who needs a lot of individuality, and they're not in a serious relationship, and they've never been in like a serious long-term like romantic partnership as of yet in their life. But they were asking me the other day, like, oh, am I ever going to be like not alone? Like, it's like, well, there's nothing afflicting Venus, and Venus is your most beneficial planet in your chart. And so like I do see, strong potential for this person to like have a good partnership. All of the issues, all of the like malefic stuff is in their 6th house. Mars in conjunction with Saturn in the 6th, to me, is like, it says like working really, really hard for like a long time and getting like burnt out and possibly having like chronic inflammation. There is also hope for their career as well, because even though it's in the 6th house, there's this thing in Hellenistic astrology that talks about the exact, I can't remember what the term is for it, but basically because the MC is at 14 degrees and the sun is at 13 degrees, they're in a trine. So that kind of like provides a way for like the MC, like the career, to like pull up the sun out of the 6th house to where they can have a career where they're getting basically their needs met, and they're able to like give in the way that is like beneficial for them to do so. So no chart is beyond repair, but I definitely don't see this one having major issues. The main issues all have to do with the 6th house, the topic of health. Another thing about this person is that with their North Node in the 11th house is also having to do with hopes, dreams, and wishes, not just groups and friends. So this person, I think this just like further emphasizes the fact that they're a very ambitious person that's like constantly setting goals for themselves. So it's just going to be a matter of like strategy, because Virgo has a lot to do with strategy. So it's just going to be a matter of like making, strategic goals and strategic steps for themselves to like get to where they want to be at in life. And I think they're doing a banging job so far. I think that's it for this chart. Let's move on to another chart. All right, so for our second chart, what we have is the chart of a person who is of a similar age and gender, but their chart looks quite different. The last chart was like dominated by Martian energy. It was very, very strong. Mars, lots of fire, or like predominantly the energy was fire. And in this chart, we have everything except for fire. So this person has an Aquarius rising, which is air sign. They have a Pisces moon, which is obviously water. And then they have a Virgo sun, which is earth. And then when we look at their Mars, it's in Cancer, and Cancer is a water sign that is considered Mars's fall. So Mars kind of gets like doused with water here, and we all know what happens to fire when you dump out water. So this person kind of has like a very, very different energy than the previous person. So let's just start with their rising sign. So the rising sign is Aquarius. That means that their chart ruler is Saturn, and Saturn is right here in their third house. So Aquarius is a sign that's focused on groups. It's a humanitarian sign, and I would say like this person definitely, to what I would expect, Aquarius rising is going to tend to focus more on what's going on in the world, or what's going on in their local community, or what's going on in their particular group. And that is definitely the truth with this person. And I would say that they're generally more woke about topics, both globally and locally, than I am. So this is one of those peoples in my life. Like Aquarius tends to like bring news and information about things that are going on that I haven't been aware of. They're generally better at these things than other people. So that's definitely true of this person. But also when we look at where their chart ruler is and it's in the third house of siblings, their group association is with their siblings, and a lot of the people like that when I get together with this person, the people that they're always talking about is their siblings. So a lot is going on here. Obviously their chart ruler is in their third house, but it's also they're in a big family. So this is a sign, Aquarius is a sign of groups, and their perspective as a member of a group of siblings bears a significant role in their lives, I would say. Now, Uranus is right here in the, this is the first house according to whole sign astrology, but according to many chart systems, this would actually be the 12th house. But either way you slice it, it's in the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius is on the rising sign. And what, like, this person really stands out, like, wherever they go, because Aquarius is the sign of the alien, it's the sign of the foreigner, it's the sign of somebody who's unique, who's different. And it's kind of like this person cannot help but be noticed. Like, whenever I go somewhere with them, and this is true to what they've told me their experience is, like, when I'm not there, it's just that, like, they always get noticed. And sometimes, like, they don't want to be noticed. Like, they have their sun in Virgo. This is a very private sign, a sign of the loner, be like being isolated, being and the 8th house is kind of like behind closed doors. It's more of a private sign. So like a lot of the time they get more attention than they really are wanting. But they definitely attract a lot of attention. Like people definitely notice them, and one reason that they notice them is that just basically their aura is like really unique. It is really different. And when we're like in a group of people, I've noticed that they stand out even more. Like it's almost like the quieter that they are, the more that they stand out, because essentially just like their vibration, like their level of being is like it's to a different beat. And like being a psychic and an intuit myself, I can like feel their rhythm literally being different than other people's. And generally it's slower. Generally people are much more frantic, and they are kind of have this like soft, slow, like calm energy. And it can kind of make people a little bit nervous when she's quiet, because they can feel that it's different, but they don't know what it's about. And so then that can intimidate people. I've noticed for sure. So that's the rising sign. And then we have so that's the rising sign in the chart ruler. And then we have the sun in Virgo and the moon in Pisces. So this person was born under a full moon. And that is I don't know, it's a high level of like psychic energy, and then it's a Pisces full moon nonetheless. So Pisces is like a kind of like a calm, quiet, otherworldly energy, and I think this definitely like comes through for this person in their aura. They, true to like some Virgo characteristics, they are a gardener. They have a ton of plants, and what I think is in fact the case is that they garden in a very Pisces moon way. So it's like this person like talks to their plants. She like can feel and sense what they need. She personifies her plants, calls them she, her. I think she even like sings and plays music for her plants. It's really beautiful, in my opinion. She's also a dancer, which I just think is so beautiful combination of Pisces and Virgo, because Virgo is the body. It's mutable earth, and so for anybody who has significant Virgo, their relationship to their body and their experience, their tangible experiences that they have somatically are just so important in the life, and they're so integral to this person's experience. But like this sun sign is this energy that we're projecting. It's where we give our lives to other people. And so this person having a Virgo sun and being a dancer and a performer, and they actually even teach dance, because if you look at their midheaven is in Sagittarius, the sign of the teacher, it's beautiful. Like they perform, they do interpretive dance. It's very moving, and they also teach it. So this is definitely something that they give to the world. They're also a yoga instructor, which is also like super appropriate. It's all about body movement, but it's like fluid, peaceful body movement, graceful body movement. And that's where Pisces comes in. And Pisces is like the sign, like in medical astrology, associated with the feet. And so when you think about the feet just like moving around, like the way that this person moves through moves through their life really is just very graceful and ethereal. So then let's talk about, so now we have their sun, their moon, and their rising sign. Now their moon is in their second house, and their second house is Pisces. This puts the second house into focus for this person. So the second house, it has to do with resources, and it also has to do with value and worth and our own particular piggy bank. So Pisces here dissolves the ego. It dissolves attachments, and it dissolves, you know, it's the water sign. It like puts out the fire, right? And so this is a difficult placement in this sense that this person is really not attached to money. They don't have their ego attached to how much money they're making or how successful other people view them. And those things can be very positive things, but also having Pisces moon here can be a challenging thing, because it can also be like difficult and like confusing. It's kind of like the fog of Pisces here, like maybe like not always knowing how they're going to make money or where they're going to go. Like maybe being very like intuitive about what things it could be, but then just like struggling to like actually manifest, because Pisces is a sign here that like doesn't want to manifest. So there's kind of like a non-attachment to material stuff, which is very simple and beautiful, but it can also create problems in this person, like going after a meaningful career or knowing how to actualize their goals, or things of that nature, like providing for themselves financially, those types of things. So very much opposite to the chart we just looked at. And once again, Mars is in a water sign. So the fire here is like very muted. Okay, so then we begin to see people are always attracted to subconsciously a person that completes the things about themselves that are not as developed, I guess is a good way of putting it. So with an Aquarius rising, their partner sign is Leo. Now, Leo is obviously a fire sign. It's a massive fire sign, and it's very much about drive and very much about ego, similar to Aries. So that's where this person's attracted to. When we look at Black Moon Lilith again talks about what are the things that have like kind of like been banished or like fled the scene when we were younger. And generally it's connected to like our association with gender. So person has a very feminine presentation and attracts very masculine people. It attracts a lot of fire into their life predominantly, in the people that they're attracted to, and also in the people that are attracted to them. So they really look for a partner to be like the assertive one, to be the dominant one, to be the like aggressive go-getter. Like this person wants to be pursued in the relationship. Dated an Aries before. Fits. I think they've also dated Leo people as well. Sometimes Sagittarius people have been really attracted to them, and sometimes the people that are attracted to them, like I really get the EBGBs about, because it's almost like so much fire that I feel like they're gonna like try and control my friend or try and like, you know, manipulate them, because they're like, oh, I'm gonna save you, and I'm gonna like be the one that like sweeps you off your feet and like, you know, gives you the life you desire, princess. Like something that they kind of have to like be careful for is like sometimes there is somebody who's like excessively dominant trying to like take advantage of their receptive spirit. So then they also have, if we look at Venus and Mars, what is Venus in Cancer attracting? So it's really similar to the Cancer moon, which actually was the chart we just looked at. So this person definitely needs like somebody who's emotionally safe, and they need somebody who's stable and reliable in their life. This is also, I feel like, describes how they love, because there's the Mars there. So what are they putting out there from like a perspective of like what are they wanting to give and project and go after. So this person can be very nurturing, and that that can translate to mothering people, or to feeding people, or to just providing an emotionally safe environment for others. With Saturn as their chart ruler, they tend to like help, I would say, like in the parenting of like their nieces and nephews. And they can be very maternal in that way. And they kind of do it in like a very Saturn chart ruler way, where it's like they are able to provide like consistency and stability, and like clear expectations in the children that they are a part of, because they do also teach children as well as have nieces and nephews. What else? Okay, so Mercury is in Libra. Okay, so, and we have Chiron here. So, and the North Node. So when we were talking about the nodes, this was something that's shared from the chart we looked at before in this chart, is that Saturn is in Aries. So Saturn is in Aries, is a sign that I believe has to do with learning. Like Saturn is here to teach you something about autonomy and your will versus like coexisting or collaborating with another person. So Venus is like the opposite energy over here in Libra, which is like bringing together, collaboration, working as a team, quality. It's definitely the consideration of like a binary system, whereas like Aries is an individual and is just considering the self and going where the self is wanting to go. And so this is also, I feel like, combined with the South Node being here in Aries, which is interesting, because I was saying how this person generally doesn't have a whole lot of fire in the current life, but I feel like they do have it within them, because you see that their South Node is in Aries. And they can be very direct with some of the like analysis that they do as a Virgo, right? They can they can have that sort of like servant heart, but like also critical nature, and sometimes they can deliver it in an Aries way, which is like very direct, which I always appreciate Aries energy. But they also have this like Black Moon Lilith in Leo in the 7th house, so it's very much like it's not expected of them. It hasn't been like fully like assimilated into like their identity for them to like be direct, be bold, be aggressive. And so the South Node and the North Node, when we did the video about the South Nodes and the North Nodes, and I was talking about how it's not just as simple as moving away from the energy of the south node and moving into the energy of the north node, which if we did that for this person, it would be like moving away from fire, moving away from the ego, moving away from will, and just moving into like learning how to get along with other people. And it's kind of like, I mean, this person, like, I don't see that for them in the rest of their chart. Like, this is about balancing this energy. And the other thing too is that this person is alone and does really well with having a lot of space. You know, like when you look at Aquarius, it's like this person, you know, this is the sign of boundaries and needing space and taking space. It's a cool fixed air sign. And then this person has, you know, Virgo as their sun sign, which has to do with you know, isolation, and the eighth house is private. So this person, like, you know, they're pretty good at being alone in that sense of the fact of like managing their own self when it comes to like emotions and things like of that nature. But then they have their south node in Libra, so it's kind of like, or their north node in Libra, excuse me. So it's kind of like one of the things for them to like learn in life is like how to integrate that in relationships, and how to like be with other people, and how to share a life. And also the sun is the eighth house, in the eighth house of shared resources. So also the topic of like when and if this person does end up getting into a partnership, it's kind of like the topic of sharing resources with others, and how are we going to do that, especially when somebody needs a lot of space. How's that going to look, right? And how are we going to do that? So those are some of the topics that are going to like come up in this person's life, no doubt. Already has to some extent, but they are single right now, and I would say this is like the biggest thing that's going on in their life right now, is just trying to get up on their own 2 feet and figure out like how they're going to provide for themselves financially. Neptune's also transiting through their house right now, so that kind of makes things even harder. Okay, here is another chart example. So this person is a Scorpio rising. They do have Venus and Neptune on their ascendant. I would say that this person heavily identifies with feminine energy. This person did have kind of like a traumatic, maybe not terribly traumatic childhood, but they did have quite a bit of pain that had impacted them for life from their mother. So I think that's part of the Scorpio rising coming into play. Whereas if your mother wasn't a safe person for you, then it kind of it can leave you with a perspective that the world's not a safe person, if like the one person that was supposed to be safe for you was not. So I do see that. And then this person also has Neptune on the ascendant. Neptune on the ascendant makes a person very spiritually minded. It's similar to Pisces rising in the fact that this person sees everything through the lens of their belief system, and their belief system is incredibly, like, almost like all consuming. So that's one thing that I've seen with Neptune on the ascendant, and it can be a scary combination to have with Scorpio rising, because there isn't trust, but there still needs to be faith, because faith is such an important part of a person's life when they have Neptune on the ascendant in this way. So, I mean, no matter whether people are religious, always spiritually minded, and that's always the lens through which they see their entire reality of life. The way that this manifested for them is a very religious person. So this person has Sagittarius as their sun sign, which is the sign of belief. It's a sign of faith, and it's Sagittarius specifically, even more so than Jupiter's other sign, Pisces, is associated with religion, because Pisces kind of like dissolves boundaries, so it kind of creates a spiritual belief system that doesn't have definition, whereas Jupiter in his sign of Sagittarius is a fire sign, and that is like more of a cutting energy, and so it does give a little bit more shape and a little bit more definition to the faith and the spiritual belief of the person who has a heavy amount of Sagittarius in their chart. So Sagittarius also will make somebody, it can make somebody very playful and very adventurous, and that was like also true of this person. They were just like a playful person. They found a lot of joy in the small things in life. They love to laugh. They're just really like that joyfulness energy that like Sagittarius or Jupiter can like bring to the table. Even though this person had a lot of sorrow and a lot of pain in their life, they also energy that really brings life to people and reminds people of what it's like to be a child discovering the world for the first time. So they were also a teacher. So this person also was a teacher for a good amount of time in their life. Predominantly, this person's religion was super, super important to them. And then we also have the fact that their sun is in the second house. So the sun is in Sagittarius. We kind of talked about a little bit about that. So the second house is skills that we have to monetize. So like I said, this person was a teacher. They taught children. They got their teaching degree. But also this person was extremely religious. So Sagittarius on those two elements. But then the other thing here was that sun in the second house means the second house topics are very central. And this person also has their south node in the second house. I see this a lot, like in a lot of people's charts, where the north node is in conjunction with the sun. And it makes me wonder, because I see this disproportionately, like what is going on here? Like during the time that the sun is with like in the sign of the node, is that because we're getting close to eclipse season, more people are born? I'm not really sure. Or if it's just something about the experiences that I'm seeing or the patterns that I'm noticing. But I do see that a lot with people who have their sun in the same sign as their south node. So anyway, so this person has that in their chart. And this talks about not just our resources and our values, but this is also the sign of the self-worth. And like I said, like the body is something that actually falls into this category that like a lot of people, like a lot of astrologers miss that. And I just noticed this through like looking at a bunch of different charts with people who had issues related to their body and like what transits they were having and where placements were in their birth chart. And yes, the second house is a house of resources, but your body is also a resource that you have, and your relationship to your body is one of self-worth and one of value. And so this person actually has their chart ruler, which is a malefic. That's hello, it's Mars over here in the sign of Virgo, which is the sign of the body. They have Mars is overcoming. That's a Hellenistic technique I haven't like really taught you guys about, but it's basically, it means that Mars is in a triumphant aspect to the sun. So it's kind of like afflicting the sun. So basically what that means is that, throughout this person's life, they really, really struggled a lot with like body issues and self-worth issues connected to their body. They had like lifelong eating disorder, and also their religion, the Sagittarius, also played a role in like their perception of like their self-worth. And so that was a really, really, really sad, I would say, like tragic part of their life that was like ongoing for many, many years. And then so then what we do have is we have, okay, so sorry, I got a little sidetracked looking at the sun. So then we have the moon. So the moon is also in Virgo, and the moon is in the 11th house. This person had a big family, and then they were born into a fairly big family, and then they had an even larger family themselves, and then they became very involved in church, and then they also had a massive friend group. So to have the moon in the 11th house, I feel like is really saying something about what they needed to be nourished, was just like to be part of a group. And I would say that that was something that has been a really like positive part of their life, where they really have been part of a lot of groups and been like very accepted by the groups that they were a part of. So in that way, like their life was very enriched. And as you can see, like their moon is really like not being afflicted by any malefics or anything like that. So then we also have the moon being in the sign of Virgo. So Virgo is a sign of service, and this person was very service oriented on like a practical level. So like their love language definitely is like giving and is basically like noticing other people's needs and then meeting those needs. And I would say that this person was very observant when it came to like noticing what other people were interested in and giving appropriate gifts. But also they very much had like a very strong need to like be taken care of and to have other people serve their needs on a practical level. And I do see that with the Virgo moon. It's kind of just like really like needing to be nourished through like the love language of acts of service. Okay, so then those are the big three. So then we can see, then we can divide the chart up and we can take a look and we can see that dividing the chart up on the ascendant and the descendant axis, we can see that we have the malefics and the benefics. So it's a night chart, so the most challenging planet is going to be Saturn, and the most generous planet is going to be Venus. So, okay, Venus is a planet associated with resources. This person, this rules this person's seventh house of partnerships, and I would say that their marriage definitely. Oh boy, we gotta plug in. Their marriage definitely was a position where they received a lot of their like monetary resources from their relationship to their partner, and that security and stability was something that was very important for them on like a practical level as well as an emotional level. But we do also see that Venus is in Scorpio, which is a sign that is Venus's exile. So Venus is kind of like brokenhearted in that sign. And then we can also see that the sign is above the horizon, which means that in the majority of charts, this puts Venus in the 12th house of endings. So this person had a like long marriage and they did well financially from it, but they ended up getting a divorce, and it was like they're super brokenhearted about it. So that is something that like played out with their Venus placement. Even though Venus gave them like the most, I would say Venus was giving them the most when it came to like financial provision, and Venus also gave them the most with like Jupiter is in their seventh house of relationship. They did, like I said, they had a lot of really positive relationships, and then they also had children by that marriage. So we do have a Chiron here, which I'll get back to later. But anyway, so let's see what else about this person. Yeah, they definitely needed their partner to like provide the resources for them on like a financial level. This is sort of further emphasized by the black moon Lilith in Capricorn. Capricorn is definitely a daddy energy, a father energy, a provider energy. It's like an ambitious earth sign, so it's kind of like all about like taking on responsibility and doing what needs to be done in order to like ensure a good future. So it was really important for this person to like have a partner that was able to like provide those things in life. And then what they provided was they were a stay-at-home mom, so they worked with children. Leo is a sign that is associated with children, and then they were also a teacher, so that also is with the Sagittarius. So they have Pisces on their fifth house, and so sometimes where Pisces is placed is where dreams are. So this person like dreamed of having a lot of children, and they ended up like getting their wish fulfilled. Venus, I'm sorry, not Venus. The ruler of their fifth was in their seventh house. So basically, they had a marriage, and then that they had a lot of children through that marriage. So Jupiter is a planet of expansion, and Pisces has no boundaries. So this person actually ended up having a lot of children. And I would say Chiron, like the wound that will never heal, is the fact that they had a couple miscarriages, and that was like really devastating for them. So what else can I tell you about this planet? Okay, so Saturn in the fourth house. I do think that this had to do with like what I said earlier, was like their relationship with their mother was like not particularly safe. They didn't really feel like emotionally close to their mother. Their mother actually made a lot of rules for them, like forced them to like exercise, forced them to like restrict their food. Basically, their mother like enforced and then reinforced this person's like eating disorders and like issues with their own body that was kind of like coming from the judgmental or the harshness of their mother, and that really played like a massive role in this person's life, because as we can see, you know, with the South Node in Sagittarius along with the Sun and the house of self-worth and what we were talking about with the Moon, their North Node, you know, was over here in Virgo. So, okay, sorry, not Virgo. It's in Gemini. So, yes, so we did have this difficulty with the mother, and the issues with the self-worth. But then when we talk about the North Node being in Gemini, so this is in the eighth house. The eighth house is shared resources, and the eighth house is also just talks about change in general and like the massive turnover, like loss and dealing with loss and turnover. So, like this person, when they went through their divorce and it was like so heartbreaking, they had a really, really, really hard time coping with that change, like coping with that loss. Even though, like, you know, they did well when it came to like money and children, and that sort of like outcome of the divorce. It was just like the fact, like it was kind of like one thing that they would say a lot was like it was really, really hard for them to like give up, basically like this was not the way life was supposed to be. Like it wasn't their plan for their life to end up getting divorced, and so it was just really, really hard to like adapt and change, which is like all eighth house. And so if this person has their North Node in the eighth house, it's kind of like saying that this person, like the concept of like being adaptable and being flexible to like your expectation was just kind of like a very, very new, a very, very new experience for them, that was needed. So there's that, and then there's also the fact that Sagittarius is the teacher, and Sagittarius is looking for the answers. But Gemini is like the learner, and the Gemini is like this curious energy that like really engages with, I would say, like a very, very wide variety of like perspectives and people. So we've talked before about Sagittarius and Gemini, and Sagittarius is a sign that is associated with mastery, and that can be mastery of specific topics. But Gemini is more scattered and is more like practical. So it's like learning a little here, learning a little there. And it's also the sign of communication in general. So this person, another thing that they really struggled with was like being around people that didn't like share their same belief system was kind of like a scary thing for them. Like it was kind of like, oh, I don't really want to be around like people that don't share my belief system. I don't really know how to have a conversation with them. I don't really know how to build a connection with them because I've kind of just have made, you know, this religion kind of like my whole life and my whole perspective. I have Neptune on my ascendant. This is how I view reality. And so like people that are outside of this and people have a different perspective, this is like very threatening, scary, like, and sometimes just new area. Like this is the North Node. So this is just kind of like new energy for them. It's just sort of like unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity can make us nervous. So throughout life, I would say that this person really did make a lot of progress on this North Node energy and really learned how to like open up and like have conversations with people from different experiences and different backgrounds, and really started like learning how to listen to people more, because they really do have like such a big, genuine, like warm, like I said, Jupiter heart. Yeah, anyway, so that is basically it for this chart. Okay, here we have another chart. This is the chart of a man in his 30s. He is a Leo rising, and he is a Aquarius sun and moon in the 7th house. So let's talk about Leo rising. So Leo is the sign of the heart, and it's the sign of the ego and the self and self-expression and identity, as we already know. So what does it mean to have this as your rising sign? Well, this person has a very big heart. Jupiter increases that, because we do see that Jupiter is in the rising sign, and Jupiter expands whatever Jupiter touches. So this person has a huge heart for other people, predominantly, I would say, is what this person is really putting their heart into. And that makes sense because they have their sun and their moon in the 7th house of other people and significant relationships. And let's also not forget that the rising sign also reflects the body. So this person was actually born prematurely, and then when they were in high school, they developed a heart condition, and then when they were in their early 20s, they had a heart attack, and now they're on heart meds. So this is a really, and they also suffer from poor circulation, so they're cold quite frequently. So this is really a thing that I have seen actually in several Leo rising charts, is having heart conditions. We do have, the heart as the rising sign indicating the body, and sometimes what can happen is that this can indicate physical conditions and physical issues. For example, Pisces rising, or even just having Neptune on the ascendant, and even Jupiter, because this person has Jupiter, it can make a person's condition in general very sensitive. So sensitive digestive wise, or sensitive to like topical things. So having allergies, easily getting rashes, having food intolerances. These are all things that Neptune, Jupiter, and Pisces can indicate, because Jupiter and Neptune are the ruler of Pisces, and Pisces is the sign of no boundaries and a high level of sensitivity. So this person does also have, Venus in Pisces as well. So they do have some Pisces elements. So when we're looking at a physical condition of a person, it is significantly the rising sign, but it's also taking into account other placements in their chart, and predominantly the personal planets. So that is the first thing that I wanted to say about the Leo rising of this person, but it definitely comes out in this person having a huge heart for other people. Now, what would I say? Sometimes the person loves too strongly, too deeply, too intensely for social appropriateness. And so that can be a little bit like Cancer, having emotions that are not always fitting with like the social expectation and social expectations of how to behave according to social rules of relationships. So we see that issue a little bit with Leo as well, as sometimes there is a opposite reaction to where the heart shuts down and the heart closes off and the heart hardens. So when you hear about somebody hardening their heart, it's kind of like getting plaque in their arteries, buildup of that kind of thing on a physical level, but on a psychological or mental or emotional level, this can be shutting yourself off towards like loving people that cause you too much pain, or that there isn't an appropriate social outlet for those feelings. So that is something that we could expect this person to struggle with or deal with. And then we have, looking at the sun and the moon, we have both the sun and the moon in the sign of Aquarius. We also have the ruler of Aquarius in his own sign. Saturn rules Aquarius. So one thing that we would want to look at with following our traditional pattern is, the first thing that we look at is looking at the ruler of the rising sign. Well, the ruler of the rising sign is the sun. So that would actually be then the next thing we look at is the sun sign. So it's kind of like 2 for 1 on this. The sun is super, super important in this person's life, because not only is it their chart ruler, but it's also their sun sign. So it's kind of like has a double importance here. Aquarius, we talked about the qualities of Aquarius, and with this person both having their sun and their moon in Aquarius, and Saturn also in Aquarius, and Mercury in Aquarius, all these things are true of this person. Aquarius has to do with the groups. It has to do with friendships, group identity, group association. This is super important to this person. This person has a lot of friends, and they're very close to their friends. They love their friends very much. Being involved socially with groups of people is something that is super important to them. As a Leo rising, they are on a quest to find the self, and also to learn to love the self. So these are 2 Leo things, and because it's in their on their rising sign, that's what they're moving towards. That's what they're learning to assimilate and then embody for other people, is the topic of identity and the topic of self-love. And this is something that comes out significantly in their relationships. Aquarius is a sign that's predominantly focused on other people, and it's focused on groups. So it's difficult for it's kind of unsurprising that this person has a heart condition, because it's difficult for the sun, which is their chart ruler, to be in the sign of Aquarius. This is the exile of the sun, because Aquarius is a cold sign, and it's focused on other people. So this person gets cold very easily, and they're also so focused on other people that sometimes it's too neglecting of the self. So this person definitely experiences that. with the moon in Aquarius, sometimes there's a difficulty getting to the bottom of their feelings, or getting to, this is what we would expect with moon in Aquarius, is that this person needs a lot of, they need a high level of stability, and they need a definite level. There's definitely like a boundary level, a hard surface there when it comes to accessing their emotions and processing their emotions and talking about their emotions. It can be something that's a little bit hard to get through, but that is something we would expect, and that's indicated with the moon and the sun in Aquarius. The other thing too is that freedom is so, so important. Remember, Aquarius is the sign of freedom. It's the rebellious sign. It's the sign that's breaking out of the norms. So this kind of, this sign kind of has like a double, almost like a contrary elements in it, because it's ruled by Saturn. So it is a very, very responsible sign. It's a sign that takes on a lot of responsibility for other people, and can have a lot of hard surfaces. But on the other end, it has Uranus as its modern ruler, and this is the planet of rebellion. This is the planet of alienation. This is the planet of new, progressive, and like foreign thoughts, topics, and lifestyles. This is a planet of surprises and the unusual things, the strange things. And so we would expect this person to be unusual, to feel like they don't necessarily fit in anywhere, to feel kind of like special or unique, or like they can't quite conform to the group. This is Aquarius, right? But also, this is their seventh house of relationships. So we would expect this person to need a lot of freedom in their relationships, a lot of autonomy, a lot of like boundaries in their relationships, to be themselves, and to have complete freedom to figure out how to express themselves and what they need and what they want. And this is also indicated by Leo. So this is definitely a person that needs potentially like an unconventional relationship, and that's what we would expect from this person. And this person has been in unconventional relationships, and we would also probably expect that this person has not gotten married. Maybe we would, because Saturn is in the seventh, but we would expect it to be unconventional. So that is exactly what this person has experienced. They were married for a while, they had an untraditional marriage, and then they ended up getting divorced. But now with the current partner that they're at, they have no interest in marriage, because it's essentially too traditional and too restrictive. So that is kind of talking about the sun and the moon. So when we look at this chart, we would divide the line down the ascendant and descendant axis to figure out whether this is a day chart or night chart. The ascendant is at 19 degrees, so it's right about there, right between Mercury and the sun. So that makes this person a day chart, because their sun is above the horizon, even though barely. They were basically born on a new moon at sunset. So because this is a day chart, then we know that the most troublesome malefic, their greatest malefic is going to be Mars, and their greatest benefic is going to be Jupiter. So let's talk about this. First of all, the malefic. Now, we've already talked about the topics of fitting in with the group, and the group being super important to this person, and freedom being super important to this person. So when we have the malefic in the 11th house, and the 11th house has to do with groups and group associations, and we see the malefic there, it's pretty easy to make the assumption, and which I think is accurate to this person, that the pain of Mars would be similar to or related to the topic of the pain of being different or not fitting in. And this is in fact the case. This person has experienced a significant amount of pain in the form of feeling like they don't fit in, feeling like they're not included, feeling like they don't know how to, maybe make their own friends, or feeling like, or experiencing rejection from friends that they loved very much, that didn't want to be friends with them anymore, or rejected them, or ousted them from the circle. That type of rejection has been, I would say, super painful. And we do see this aspect right here where Mars is actually overcoming Jupiter, which is their greatest benefic. So when we see that, like the way that I would interpret this here is that if Jupiter is increasing the love that this person has for other people, it can be quite painful when there's that rejection. It can kind of afflict afflict this part of the self, right? Afflict the heart. So that is what in fact has happened with this person in multiple scenarios and multiple phases of their life. But then let's talk about their greatest benefic. So Jupiter is on their ascendant. This makes the person gregarious. This makes the person like really lovable and jovial and that type of thing. But one thing that this has had an effect of is this person, Jupiter is also the explorer, and this person has a very, very deep love of travel and exploring the world through multiple means, mostly through physical travel, going on different trips, going to different places, meeting new people, meeting lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different experiences, lots of different skills. So this person loves to explore the world that way, exploring the world through food, all of these ways. So this person absolutely loves to travel, and they absolutely need freedom to do it. So another thing that I see going on with this person's chart, with Leo rising puts Taurus as their 10th house. Now this person also has their midheaven in their 10th house, which kind of like doubles down on Taurus being the house of career, the house of what this person aspires to when it comes to career. Now this person does actually work in right now they work recreationally in environmental sciences. They do research for wildlife, sea life in particular, which is interesting with their sign being the cupbearer and associated with water as well as air. But and also they do have Venus, the ruler of this, in a water sign, the sign of the ocean. So they do research for the wildlife, the marine life in the ocean, particularly whales. And then what they do for career, they've always had kind of like an interest in electronic cars. They work on cars, and this is appropriate when we see Virgo as the second house of skills that this person has to monetize, because working on cars is definitely a Virgo skill, because you have to be able to work with your hands. You have to be able to intelligently take apart, diagnose, and put back together. It has to be detail oriented. It has to be problem solving. And these are all of these Virgo qualities. But what is needed with the 10th house, Taurus, there's a need for stability. There's a need for predictability. There's a need for a high level of resources. So this person really, and I've seen this with a lot of other Leo rising charts as well, is that when Taurus is at the 10th house, this person needs to make a serious amount of money in order to feel safe, in order to feel successful, in order to feel stable. And that honestly is a primary, of primary importance when it comes to what exactly they do for work. This person has actually done pretty well when it comes to the finance aspect of things. They've been able to provide for themselves, but they have had a lot of trouble here with authority figures, with toxic work environments, that type of thing. We see with their North Node in Capricorn, they have Neptune and Uranus in Capricorn, so it's been difficult for them to find a career that allows them basically to be themselves, and allows them also freedom, which includes freedom to travel. So because traveling, as somebody with Jupiter on their ascendant, it's so important for this person. Freedom, because they're an Aquarius, self-expression, being themselves, because they're Leo. It's hard for them to get all that they need from the work environment that they're in, because the work that they have chosen is one primarily because of stability and success of resources, which they have achieved. But you see that there's this square right here between their midheaven and Jupiter. So I do feel that this square right here is something that is a tension point that they're actually currently experiencing and have been experiencing for a while, but it's this need to travel and wanting to travel for work and having the freedom to move around and explore the world while they're working. But the career that they've chosen is something that kind of like ties them down to like a particular shop. So currently this person is working on changing the career and getting into something that they're able to do online. They're going to be most likely working in tech, which is also something that utilizes their Virgo skills. I definitely see a lot of people in tech with Virgo qualities. So they should be well suited for that type of position. It's also online, and we do know that Aquarius is associated with the internet and with online activity, because this is an air sign. So one thing too about this person that's very, very Aquarius is their awareness to global events, to news, to society. This is a sign that prioritizes the group over the individual. And I would say that this person is definitely democratically minded. So they're much more leaning towards like socialism over like capitalism, which is, capitalism is just kind of like valuing the individual. Socialism has a heavy emphasis on equal distribution of like the wealth in the economy, so that the people, the group of the, of the country can really have the best. So that's definitely an Aquarius value system. And even being involved in politics is an Aquarius thing. Aquarius and Leo are considered political signs. And so it's interesting to me that this person is just always aware of the news, always aware of what's going on, like in the world, in politics, in the economy, that type of thing. And because it's an air sign too, this is another thing that air signs are predisposed to, is anxiety, because the air rules the central nervous system. And because of that, anybody who has a lot of air in their chart, they're prone towards anxiety. I mean, we're already living in a culture where people are prone to anxiety. And part of that is actually due to the fact that so much of our lives have moved to online. So there's an increase in our nervous system, in our, basically like in our nervous system. There's an increase in that. There's an increase in the air activity for the general population. So everyone now is basically predisposed to anxiety. But if you have a lot of air in your chart, you're even more so prone to anxiety. So that is something that this person has struggled with in the past. Okay, and I think that is basically it for this chart. Okay, here we have another chart. This is another woman in her 20s. We have the rising sign is Capricorn. We see there's a lot going on right by the ascendant, but the only planet that's actually in conjunction with the ascendant degree is Neptune. So we looked at a chart that had this aspect earlier for the woman in her 50s. She also had Neptune on her ascendant, and was a very spiritually minded person. They had their sun in Sagittarius, and they were extremely religious. This person right here, they have Neptune on their ascendant, but their moon is in Cancer. So this kind of like heightens the intuition because of the water. Also, they have their sun and their moon together in Cancer. So this is like a double whammy here with the intuitive water sign. So what this person is incredibly psychic, incredibly intuitive, and just like we saw with Neptune on the ascendant in the previous chart, their spirituality, their faith is of incredible and primary focus for their life. So we see that. And then we can also see that this person also has Jupiter on their ascendant, similar to the chart of the man in his 30s. So this person is also an explorer of sorts. They're actually taller than I would say like other people in their family. They're like the tallest of their sisters and all that. And that's what Jupiter sometimes does on the ascendant, is makes people taller. The other thing that Jupiter does is, or the other thing that can happen is that Pisces rising, or particularly a Sagittarius rising, ends up being taller as well. So the rising sign is something that does affect the body. And it's always going to happen in relation, obviously, to what are the restrictions of your genetics. So somebody who's tall might be like tall for their race, but they might not be necessarily tall, and vice versa. So I would say, like, given this person's like genetic history, they're significantly on the taller side. When we are looking at this chart to just get like a general overview of the person's life, their major issues in life, psychology, themes, which is what we're doing right now. So we see that the rising sign of this person is Capricorn. So Capricorn is a sign, as you all know, of planning for the future. It's ruled by Saturn. So Saturn is this person's chart ruler. Saturn, or Capricorn, is concerned with achieving goals that will prepare you and slash or your loved ones, your descendants, your children for the future. But this person has Neptune on the ascendant, and as well as Jupiter. So this person is definitely a dreamer. So a big theme of this person's life right away that you can see is like the goal of like figuring out how to like actualize your dreams, how to achieve your dreams, right? Because we have the dreamer indicated by Jupiter and Neptune, but then we have the challenge of Saturn as the chart ruler with the sign of Capricorn, saying like, I'm going to teach you how to like actually achieve, how to actualize, how to bring into the three-dimensional world what it is that you're wanting. And so so that's a big theme for this person. But then we also look at where's the chart ruler. So the chart ruler is in the 4th house in the sign of Aries. That is the considered Saturn's fall. So it's not the most happy placement for Saturn. The other thing that we can see is that there is an opposition to Chiron and the North Node. So that means that this Saturn is actually on their South Node. That can make things even more challenging with Saturn, because it's definitely talking about patterns that this person sort of like born into. What's interesting too is that this person has recovered past lives, and in their past lives, before they even looked at their chart or had me interpret it for them or anything of that nature, they remembered being a warrior in an indigenous tribe. And anyway, we'll get to the tribal elements of their chart later, but Aries is very much the warrior. They were a man, they're a woman in this life, they were a man in the past life that they remember the most of. So that was interesting as well, because Aries is also considered a masculine sign. So anyway, let's take a look at the sun and the moon. So we have the sun and the moon both in the sign of Cancer. So this person was born on a new moon. As you'll notice, many people are born on the full moons, and some people are born on the new moons as well. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I have seen a lot of new moon charts as well as full moon charts. Full moons definitely have a reputation for being active, for inducing birth, but I think a lot of people don't really acknowledge or see the new moon impacts. But I do see a number of people like born on new moons as well. Not as many as full moons, but I don't know, maybe it's just that it stands out to me when I do see it. But obviously this person has the moon sign and the sun sign at a almost exact conjunction here. And the sign is ruled by the moon. So this person is incredibly lunar oriented. And this makes them incredibly cyclical when it comes to emotions, when it comes to patterns, when it comes to, everything, because Saturn is also a planet of cycles and patterns, and so is the moon. And so one thing that I've noticed about this person is fluctuations in their mood being sort of like extreme but cyclical. But Cancer in general is also, it's a mothering sign, it's a nurturing sign. This person is very, I would say, nurturing to their partner, which makes sense because it's in the 7th house of partnerships. And they also have a strong desire to become a mother. And so that is something that has also been a theme for this person, is fertility and conception. And these are definitely Cancer topics. The other thing too is that Cancer is a sign that is concerned with stability and safety and security. So we would also assume that these were important things for this person. So we kind of looked at the chart of a new moon person who had the sun and their moon in the 7th house, but the sign was Aquarius. That person needed a lot of freedom. We saw that like as a major theme in their life. This person needs a lot of comfort. They need a lot of stability. They need a lot of emotional safety in their lives and from their partner. So they also have their moon in Cancer, which, or sorry, not their moon, their Mercury, excuse me, in Cancer. And this is fairly common to have, you know, Mercury in the same sign as the sun, but it just further amplifies the Cancer energy because it's saying that mentally they're also with Cancer. Though I would say like one thing that majorly stands out in this chart right away is all of these oppositions, right? Because we have like a cluster over here and then we have a cluster over here. And so this creates huge polarity in the chart. And when I was reading the chart for this person and I was talking to them about inner polarities and inner dialogues and inner conflicts, and just the need for balance and the need for like moving out of extremes and into harmony and into integration. This was like so much what they're experiencing. And you can see that this is also indicated by the fact that they're moving out of Mars's sign with their south node here into Venus's sign. Venus's sign is all about balance. It's all about integration and harmony and even-handedness, looking at both perspectives of things, and coming to an agreement and figuring out how to bring those things together. So this is a huge theme for this person as well. Because their sun and their moon is in the 7th, the topic of relationships is central. So we could expect that this person would experience major life lessons and major other themes significantly through one-on-one relationships as well. So when we divide the chart in half, it's a little difficult because you just have to look at the ascendant. So it's 20 degrees. In a chart like this, it's important to have a specific rising time. If you're not 100% sure of the rising time, then we might not look so closely at whether this is a day chart or a night chart, because as you can see, this sun is, what is that, 23 degrees? Yeah, 23 degrees. So it's just 3 degrees above the horizon. Basically, they're born when the sun was setting. It's born over here, they're born at sunrise. If the sun is over here, they're born at the sunset, right? So this person was born at the sunset. The sun is just setting. And this makes it a day chart barely. So with a day chart, then we know that with a day chart, then Mars is going to be their greatest malefic, and then Jupiter is going to be their greatest benefic. So what does this person do for work? Because their south node is in their 10th house. So this is kind of also an important theme. They're not just north noding with the sign of Libra, but they're also north noding into the house of public reputation, being visible, having basically all eyes on them. It's also something that is like, having to do with the magnum opus, like contributing something significant to the world and getting recognition for it, having a career, having something significant that's traditionally outside of the home that you're doing. And then they also have their midheaven in the 11th, which we'll get to in a second. But when we're talking about the career, this is a significant theme in the native's life as well. They do have placements in all of the career houses. So they have Aquarius in the 2nd house with Uranus here. So what does this person value? Because this is the house of values and the house of resources. This person, I would say, is definitely communal when it comes to their resources. They share resources with their partner. They also value the group. They're born into a big family, and this, you could consider this group of people to be like their tribe. They also have a group of like a spiritual group that they're also a part of. So being a part of the group is definitely important. And then they have Uranus here as well. So this is again a theme similar to the other Aquarius persons, that group acceptance, integration in the group, being an individual in the group, being true to yourself, standing out, feeling unique. These are also themes that this person experiences, which is very true. This person has told me that they feel different from the rest of the group. They feel isolated from the groups that they're a part of, and that's been a painful thing for them, to be different and to allow themselves to be different and to get past sort of like the fear of other people finding out about their differences. So that's definitely a topic here, but this is in the house of self-worth, which kind of, that's the reason why I'm bringing it up, because everybody has Aquarius somewhere, but this person has Aquarius in their second house with the ruler here, and it is actually very, very close to the ascendant degree. It's not in a conjunction when we are using the 6-degree orb rule, but it is close enough that I would say it definitely impacts this person. And in a lot of house systems, this would be considered in the first house as well, the house of self. So this is definitely a theme. And then we also see this theme other places, because their midheaven is in the 11th house, which is the house associated with groups. But we'll come back to the group thing, because I got a little off track because I was talking about career. So what this person does is, you'll see they have their Mars and they have their Venus in Gemini. Now, on a relational basis, this means that this person needs a lot of cerebral stimulation. They need a lot of cerebral stimulation. So in their relationships, they need to have conversations with people who see things differently, who have a different opinion, who can share ideas and information quickly and readily. And that is the thing that is going to be exciting for them in relationships, both with a primary partner as well as with friends. So that is something that's important, and it's indicated both by the Venus placement as well as the Mars placement. But we also see that this is in the 6th house of career, and having both of these signs in a career house puts a lot of energy into the career focus and the work focus. So we have Mars is going to be like their drive, like this is the passion, this is the things that they are really very motivated towards. And then also Venus is going to be, what are they attracting? What are they attracted to? What are they trying to pull in? What are they trying to manifest? So these are basically two different approaches towards the same thing. Like what are we going for, and what are we wanting to come towards us? So the sign of Gemini here, this person is a writer. Okay, so this person is a published fictional novelist, as well as a poet. And this does come out in their relationships as well. So like one thing that they will do for people they love is like write them poems. This is incredibly Venus in Gemini energy. But this person has struggled with the idea of publicity, has struggled with the idea of having career success with what they want to do. This has felt like an impossible thing for them to accomplish. Here we have so much hinging on achieving your goals and actualizing your desires over here with Jupiter, Neptune in Capricorn on the ascendant. This feels like so stressful and so impossible, and this has been such a struggle in like getting their works published, and applying to publishing houses and getting accepted in all kinds of things. This has been a very stressful process. Now, the actual writing process, they are quite passionate about and quite talented in. So this is something that is nourishing to them when you see Venus, Venus sometimes describes how we are nourished, how we receive love, as well as how we give love. So how this person is, receiving what they desire, what they love, what is pleasurable for them. Like, this is their writing. Their writing just really feeds their soul. But this is also a planet of resources. So it's no surprise, and this is the house of work. So it's no surprise that they want this to become their main career, because right now it's just something that they're doing in their spare time. And you do see that even though it looks like they didn't draw a line in this chart between Venus and the North Node, but they actually are in an exact, it's a 4-degree orb. They're in a trine. So that's actually working out in this person's favor, because the 6th house can be a house of struggle, a house of suffering, a house of difficulties, a house of work. We've talked about 6th house topics, but it can be difficult to have placements in the 6th house, but what's helping this person is that their North Node is in a harmonious trine. So it kind of is saying that fate is going to help them along towards 10th house topics. But we do have not only this being the 6th house, which can be associated with toil and suffering, but we have Mars, their greatest malefic in their chart, is also in their 6th house. So something that's been very, very difficult for this native, and I would say is actually contributes to, impacts their health in a negative way, is having to work in positions that they don't really feel passionate about, that they don't love. It's kind of like the struggle for money, the struggle to survive, the struggle to pay one's bills. This is like also a difficult burden for this person to try and make it financially, and the things that they feel that they have to do in order to financially provide as well. This is definitely something that is painful and has been a struggle for them. So, I have high hopes for this person, because they have their North Node in the 10th house, that, they will get there, especially with the ascendant. This is like the things that this is describing how this person is growing, what this person is becoming. And, so I'm looking forward to seeing their success over time. But we do have, this house of self-worth is difficult to have Aquarius here, because, again, this is a sign that's focused on others. So it can be difficult to outsource the self-worth topics to other people. And then another challenge over here is having the sun and the moon in the 7th house of relationships. And also the moon is very reflective. So it can be difficult to get a grasp on the identity based on this chart, because it's kind of like saying that the person is struggling with deriving their self-worth based on how other people value them, based on how other people are reflecting them back towards themselves. And that can be challenging, especially if you don't have people that are positively feeding and nurturing your ego. And we do see that kind of reinforced with Black Moon Lilith being in Leo being a sign of joy, free self-expression, and a sign of the ego, a sign of the self. Black Moon Lilith, we already, just to remind you guys, Black Moon Lilith is describing what part of us has had to flee the scene, so to speak, because we were told that this wasn't something that we could be. So, this person was told early on in life that they shouldn't be selfish. They shouldn't be thinking of themselves, to think of others, to serve others, all those sorts of virtues, which, have their merits. But in this case, it has created a struggle for this person. So the other struggle that this person is having is between, I think the way that they described it was between the rational side and the emotional side. So they were definitely, and this is true of most Cancer people, but I would say it's possibly to an extreme in this chart, where the Cancer individual experiences so much on an energetic level and feels so much on an energetic level that it can feel overwhelming. It can feel inappropriate to whatever scenario that they're in, because there's an awareness that they're experiencing things so much more deeply than the people around them, and it's not always socially acceptable. So that's why Cancer is the sign of the crab, because the crab has to have this exoskeleton. So this person is definitely going through trying to understand, trying to fit their emotional needs and their emotional experience of life into society and society's expectations of emotional appropriateness. And they definitely told me that one thing that was internalized when they were younger was that emotions were, weak. Emotions were a sign of irrationality, of like hysterical women that just make decisions based on emotions or have too many emotions. And so this created this strong polarity within the self, where they do have, Capricorn is a more mental planet and is more structured. And the way that they describe this is like logical self. So they're like, this is my logical self, my cold, detached, rational self. They definitely have this with Capricorn. But then they also have their like intuitive, emotional, psychic side. And they struggle between this ascendant side of them judging their intuitive side. And that can play out in gender issues and feeling that the feminine qualities are lesser than and the masculine qualities are better. Okay, lastly we have, this is actually my birth chart, so I wanted to show it to you guys because I think it's pretty great. Like a lot of the time when you're sharing somebody else's chart, there's a lot of like details that you can't really go into because you're trying to protect that person's anonymity. Or there's details that you can't go into because you don't know the details of that person's life. But obviously I know all the details of my life, and I'm happy to share it with you guys because obviously, my chart is something that I've studied very extensively and it's provided a lot of information for me. So I decided I would put my chart in here and share with you guys some stuff about my own chart. So let's do the same method here, but I might end up going over more. We'll see. The first thing that we would see with this chart is that the rising sign is Pisces. There is no planets in the first house, so we would expect Pisces, the sign of Pisces in and of itself, to dominate the rising sign. The chart ruler is over here, is Jupiter, and Jupiter is in the sign of Cancer in the 5th house, in a conjunction with both the Sun and also Chiron. So that's interesting. But first, let's talk about Pisces rising and how this has expressed itself for me. So we did take a look at a couple charts that had Neptune on the ascendant, and it's pretty similar to having Neptune on the ascendant, but it's not colored or flavored by any other sign. So Pisces rising, I see the world through a extremely spiritual lens. I'm also a very sensitive person. When you talk about Pisces affecting the body, I definitely had a lot of like skin rashes and food intolerances. I noticed very strongly how things impact my energy levels or the way that I'm feeling based on what I'm eating or how much sleep I've gotten. I definitely need a lot of sleep, which I'm not sure if this is like a Pisces rising thing, but it's something that I've noticed because Pisces is associated with dreams and with sleep. I need like kind of like an abnormal amount of sleep, and that is something there that I think is probably connected to my Pisces rising. So also Pisces is a sign that doesn't have any boundaries, and I would say that this is something that I have struggled with my whole life, because sometimes the rising sign has to do with what you learned that you had to be as a child, as a trauma response. And the thing that I learned the most, that I was the safest option for me, was to be invisible, which is kind of, it's very Pisces, because it's just kind of like dissolving yourself into the background, like blending yourself into somebody's reality. And I also found that the safest thing for me to do when I was around another person, particularly like an adult who had a lot of control over my life, was to just like mirror and affirm back to them the things that like I knew they wanted me to say. So I was very good at like picking up the underlying thing that the adult wanted from me and being able to give it to them in order to like avoid conflict. So that was something that throughout my life I have learned to kind of like overcome, like become more confrontational, which my fire, you know, I have my sun and my moon in a fire sign over here. This has helped me be confrontational. This has helped me come into myself. But with the Pisces rising, this is definitely something that has been like a theme in learning to speak up for myself and learning to not be afraid of confrontation and learning not to people please. Because the other thing too with Pisces is that there's no boundaries here, and this is a very compassionate sign, and it's a very, because it's the sign on the ascendant, it's almost more so than if you have like a Pisces sun or a different Pisces placement, because this is impacting my mind. So this makes my mind really, 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 really flexible and really capable. I'm not just like, as a child, I wasn't just mirroring the adults' reality, knowing that I was doing so in order to like appease them and keep myself safe, but it was also because of the Pisces rising, I'm actually very capable of seeing and feeling other people's realities, to the point where, because there's no boundaries, the reality becomes my own. So something that I've also needed to do is take a lot of alone time. If you'll see, my North Node is in the 12th house, which has to do with isolation. One thing I've had to learn to do is create a boundary by stepping back and literally creating a physical boundary between me and other people, because if I don't have that like actual very real boundary between me and other people, sometimes I'm unable to identify what I actually think about a situation, what is actually true for me, because it can be confusing, like if I'm picking up on the perspective, the reality, the emotions of the people or the person that I'm around. So Pisces is a very psychic sign. It's connected to the other side, and I do psychic readings for people. So that's something that I do. But what's interesting too is that what I found is that a lot of people want readings in person, where I'm sitting there, want to like in the same room as them. But because of my Pisces risingness, a lot of the time, and I've adapted to this, but it can be overwhelming for me to be in the same room as the person I'm reading for, because their perspective on the situation that they're going through and their opinions and their ego is all coming through so strongly that it almost overpowers my ability to like contact the psychic realm. It's because their energy, their reality is just projecting so strongly into mine. So I actually, for a while, I was working long distance, and I was doing readings only online, and I was doing them over the phone. And I found that so much easier, which was like ironic, because a lot of people were like, oh, how are you going to be able to do a psychic reading when, you know, I'm not even in the room? So how are you going to like pick up on my energy? And I'm like, trust me, girl, like I'm picking up on your energy like just fine. It's just really nice because it's not screaming at me. So that's some of my Pisces risingness. Pisces is also a very compassionate sign. I think because of this, because Pisces rising is capable of not only reaching the other side, but it's also a sign that is you know, when you're able to see from other people's perspectives, when you're able to feel the things that they're feeling, you have a lot of compassion for that person, because you're not approaching it from like a combative point. You're approaching it from like, okay, I can see and feel where you're at. And most people do not have bad intentions. Most people are doing the best that they can. And that's something that I think with Pisces rising, you're able to see. But this can also make you, you know, like I said, easily manipulated or easily gaslit by other people. So it's something that is, you know, when people talk about the sign of Pisces or the sign of Neptune, and they talk about delusions, that's the way that primarily it's experienced, is when somebody else's reality is pushing its way into yours. So that's what I would say to you other Pisces rising people in particular, but also Pisces just in general, is that it's not, generally you're not creating the delusions for yourself. it's generally other people that are bringing those delusions into your environment and that are just overriding yours. And because you don't have those boundaries, it's hard for you to distinguish. So you do need to take space. And then like the other thing too is that when you have a Pisces rising and Jupiter is your chart ruler, Jupiter is not a planet that appreciates boundaries of any kind. So it can be very hard to have like a clear definition for what's going on. And so that's one thing that I found as well. This is also sort of like symbolized by having a malefic in the third house of communication and not having any air in my chart. Because if you notice this, I literally do not have any air placements. Except for my north node, which is like unfamiliar territory, right? So this is kind of ironic. It's kind of funny, right? Because it's kind of like, okay, the only air that I have is like basically I'm moving in the air, in the direction of air. The air has to do with communication. So for me, I sense a lot of this Pisces rising when I go to do these videos, and the reason why, like, first of all, Pisces is a sign of imagery. So when I'm doing videos, I'm creating images, but predominantly what I experience is understanding what it is that I'm trying to communicate, but having to work really, really, really hard to take what I know, take what I feel inside and give it to you guys in clearly defined, easy to like understand terms, because I don't really think in words. I think in images and emotions and sort of like these abstract symbols that I don't really have a language for in the shared human world. So that has made it very, very difficult for me to communicate, because in a lot of times I communicate very abstractly, very chaotically. That's how I've come across to, especially people who have a lot of air in their chart, people who have a lot of Jupiter in their chart or a lot of Pisces in their chart. They tend to track more with me when I'm sort of like rambling about whatever it is that I'm saying and the way that my mind works, because I'll take like a million rabbit trails. And also, this is another thing that I do that my partner has really noticed, is that I will use maybe like 10 different words to like describe a concept that I'm trying to get across, because there isn't a like word or a term in the English language that's adequate to define or describe what it is that I'm talking about. Like Jupiter is a planet that is like sort of meta. It's like above, it's beyond what we can define. And so because my mind thinks in this way, because this is the rising sign, it's so hard for me to like take that information and put it into something definable. And so what I would end up doing was using like a bunch of different words to describe this, because I'm basically trying to get at it from all angles. Because to me, the thing that I'm trying to describe is like, it doesn't have 2 dimensions, it has like 50 dimensions. So I'm using a bunch of different words, trying to like put them all together, like, hey, put all these words together, and then maybe you're going to try and like get what I'm talking about. But it can be very confusing to somebody with a lot of like clear boundaries, like a lot of like Saturn, a lot of air in their chart, because they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, because you're using like completely different words. And because each word has a specifically clearly defined meaning for that person, it can end up being like very confusing to that person. So learning how to communicate clearly and efficiently is something that has been like a lifelong learning process for me. Okay, so moving on from the rising sign, the next thing that we have is the sun and the moon. So I don't know, I'm trying to decide whether I want to go into this whole conjunction here. I guess I will, because it's in conjunction with the sun. But basically what we have over here is we have, this is probably further compounding the issue, I think, because the moon is sort of like emotional and intuitive, and I have Mercury in conjunction with that as well. So I feel like that probably also like muddies the issue of communication. I've been told that I communicate pretty well by a lot of people, but I'm telling you that this is where you look at the chart and you see what's a subjective experience, because I'm telling you that communication to me is very, very, very difficult. Like I have to work very hard at and maybe that's why I'm like not so bad at it, because it's something that I'm putting a lot of focus and energy into, which is also symbolized by Mars being in my 3rd house, because Mars can symbolize where you're putting a lot of energy, where you're putting a lot of focus. Like this is where your drive is. It's kind of like, okay, I'm working so hard to try and communicate because of like these sort of like obstacles within myself, right? But okay, so I have the sun in Leo. I also have the moon in Leo. So this is new moon energy. We've looked at a couple new moon charts. The new moons in those charts were closer together, and the new moon energy in my chart is a little bit further away. I'll tell you why. I was actually born shortly after, like the day after a new moon in Cancer. So okay, well actually the moon is at 28 degrees, so I guess it was like a little bit more than a day, but you know, maybe like a day and a half after this new moon, because there was like a new moon shortly before I was born that was at like 29 degrees of Cancer, and which is really interesting. So basically, I'm born during the fallout of a new moon that was Jupiter conjunct the sun and the moon, but it was all in the sign of Cancer. And so I ended up being a double Leo, but I remember, like, my sun is at 1 degrees of Leo, and I remember when I was young, like, I didn't have any astrological context, except for I had a friend that lived across the street, and she was always talking about my Leo qualities or whatever, and then she would call me a Leo Cancer cusp, and she saw a lot of a lot of Cancer characteristics in me, and I find that interesting because even though I don't really believe in like cusps, like the issue of, like, for example, like if I didn't have Jupiter here, if I wasn't born right after like a Cancer new moon, then and if I didn't have Venus or Chiron here in Cancer, I wouldn't say that I had a lot of Cancer in my chart just because I was at 1 degrees of Leo. 1 degrees of Leo is Leo. That's the way that I see it. But I feel like this perspective was kind of like validated in my thinking of astrology now, because I do have this like conjunction with my sun of Jupiter, my chart ruler, in the sign of Cancer. So I definitely have a lot of Cancer qualities. But talking about Leo, with my sun and my moon here in Leo and my Mercury, the Leo, I've talked to you guys about Leo. Leo is the sign of the heart. It's a sign of the quest for the self. And I would say that, like, finding my identity, especially as a Pisces rising, and just kind of like growing up, trying to like mold myself and adapt myself and just be what was expected of me by other people, what other people wanted me to be for the first part of my life, especially because I was very religious, and I internalized that religion very heavily because of my Pisces risingness. I was having psychic experiences since I was a child, so it was very hard for me to like really leave the expectations of that religion behind, because I'd had enough spiritual experiences that I felt validated a lot of the like core beliefs that I had, which I couldn't really disassociate from the like sort of like toxic things that the religion that I was a part of was teaching me about myself. So I did end up, you know, leaving religion and going on a quest for the self, and that basically led me down a series of making different decisions, but I definitely needed a lot of freedom to do that, and I had to like break away from a lot of people. I had to break away from family. I ended up going through a divorce. I ended up leaving my friend group. I have Saturn in my 11th house of friends, so I felt very alienated from my family as a group, and then I also ended up leaving. Basically, I was isolating myself, which again is like, it was kind of something that was necessary to do, especially since I have my North Node in the 12th house. It was necessary for me to kind of like isolate myself from other people, and so in order that I could find myself. And I did end up putting on, Leo is a theatrical sign. I grew up in theater. I loved being in theater from the age of like 5 to the age of like 13. I was part of a theater group, and I always got it was a small theater group, but I always got kind of some sort of star role because like I loved it and I put all my heart into it, and I 100% found freedom of expression through theater, which is like just the most classic Leo thing that you could possibly ever hear of. But I did the same thing in my adult life, was that I put on a bunch of different hats and I became a bunch of different people. And it was like, every 2 years I just would feel like, oh, this isn't who I want to be, this isn't who I am. And I would just have to like pull everything up, pull the roots up. When you look at my 4th house, which is Gemini, like this is not a sign that's rooted. This is like the most mutable sign, the most like flexible sign that you could possibly view of. And I've moved and I've traveled. I mean, throughout my 20s, I probably had a different home like every 6 months on average. It was insane. I've had so many different jobs. But anyway, because I've been so many different people and I put on so many different hats, and I for the longest time I really didn't isolate myself in order to figure out who I was. I just moved to a different situation because I knew that I needed to escape. Basically, I knew that I needed to escape the influences I was under, because I knew the influences that I was under was causing me to be a person that didn't feel authentic, that didn't feel good. But then I would just jump into a different scenario and do the exact same thing. So learning to be myself, I really had to be alone for a few years, and I really had to take a deep look into myself, and that was a very spiritual process as well. And that's kind of when I had a big spiritual awakening, where like I mean, because I'm a Pisces rising, I'm a very spiritual person. This was, of course, how I did this, how this happened for me. Finding yourself doesn't have to be extremely spiritual and extremely meta, but it was for me, and it is for me because of the person that I am. So, ultimately, and this is a very Pisces rising conclusion to come to, is that you realize that, like, you aren't any of these things that you attach your identity to. You aren't your ego. You are yourself. You are consciousness, and you're playing the role, and your ego is just a part of yourself. And that has allowed me to detach myself from my ego to the level that I have thus far, which is just sort of like being able to have a boundary between myself and my own ego, and just observing it and recognizing like why I'm triggered in these ways, why I'm threatened by these other things. Because as a fire sign, that was like often my response to things, especially with my moon here, was it's just kind of like this was how things would come about emotionally, was very fiery. um, and just trying to understand my own self and my own outbursts really had to do with being able to be detached from my ego and just sort of observe it from that perspective, and just sort of say like, okay, well, this is what this is. And I am not my ego, but my ego is important, but it's important to not let my ego control me. And that has to do with my Aquarius North Node and learning detachment, learning that coolness and those boundaries that Saturn has to teach. So it was just learning really a boundary within myself, which makes sense because it's the 12th house. So this is really talking about the self, where we go to be alone, and needing those boundaries. The other thing with my North Node in Aquarius is this is a sign of groups. And for a while I was like, this is so confusing. Like, how can you have the sign of groups be in the house of isolation? Like, how's that going to play out? Well, it's so interesting because I have, without going into like too much detail, I basically work with a pantheon. So when I go to be alone, I have like a spirit team that I'm very aware of spirit allies, mentors, guides, deities, ancestors, things of that nature. So I feel very guided, and I feel very not alone when I go to be alone. So it's interesting because it's kind of like I go to be alone, and yet I have this team, I have this group of spirits that are helping me. So that is actually very accurate to how I subjectively experience being alone, is that I'm never fully alone. So anyway, so let's talk about, I mean, I won't go into too much talking about what it's been like having these planets in my 6th house, because we did also look at another chart of a person who had Aries in the 6th house with their sun in the 6th house, so in a fire sign in the 6th house, and how that's manifested. So I would say that this is manifested for me very, very similarly. So this is in the fact that this is the sign of kind of like, it's a difficult placement for any planet, but especially if you have your sun here, and especially if your sun has a very, very strong ego, which the fire signs do have very strong egos. So I have suffered with working in positions where I didn't have enough freedom, I didn't have enough authority, and I didn't get enough recognition for what I was doing. That has been a recurring issue for me when it comes to jobs that I do. I'm also very attracted to healthcare. So for me, I like the issue of bodies, of body, what's the word? Self-worth, self-image. That's the word I was looking for. Self-image, related to the body, and also nutrition and exercise and health in general and lifestyle. All of these things are things that have been like very interest of huge interest to me. I have a career in healthcare, and before that, I worked as a personal trainer. So this is the Mars in the second house. This is the Aries in the second house. I help people exercise. I did weightlifting, powerlifting. Help people with nutrition and diet. I majored in nutrition in college. The ruler of my second house of jobs is Mars, and Mars is in the sign of Taurus, which is a sign associated with the human body in general. So I do have that going on as well. When I had eating disorders for a really long time, so this is sixth house stuff to be sure, because, and especially Leo, because Leo is the image, the self-image, the ego, right? But then the sixth house is going to have to do with our health, and is associated with the body as well. So for like about a decade, I had quite severe eating disorders that impacted my health, both my mental health, but I was talking mainly about my physical health was impacted severely. So that was something that that also was a manifestation of dealing with the topic of self-worth and identity. And this is just the playing field of those topics was my body, because of the sixth house and because of the placement of Mars, which is the ruler of my second house of self-worth. So we can see these things, right, in this person's chart, which is, my chart. So what else do I want to share with you guys? Okay, so when we divide this ascendant, we have Pisces is the second degree. And so anyway, it doesn't really matter because I don't really have planets here, but I'm clearly a night chart because my sun is in the sixth house. So that would, according to our rule of benefics and malefics, we would say that actually Saturn is the most difficult planet in my chart, and then Venus is going to give me the best things in life. Though, honestly, this is like so debatable, because if you connect Mars to my career and my eating disorder, those have been like huge issues of my life from like the age of like 11 to the age of like 27. So it's really hard to say, and that's one thing that I've noticed too with other people's charts, the night charts and the day charts, that delineation of like what is the greatest and what is the greatest malefic and the greatest benefic for somebody, and dividing it up with the day chart, the night chart. To me, the verdict is still out, but it is something that is at least helpful for me in which in like order of what planet I'm going to look at first. So that's kind of like why I do it that way. But it's also just like your people's lives are not over. Like most of the charts that I read are for people that aren't dead yet. So it's really hard to like say, objectively what planet has given somebody the most trouble. But let's start with what is traditionally considered my greatest malefic and benefic. So when we talk about Saturn, the way that I've seen this play out in my life is when it comes to groups, as a teenager, as somebody growing up, I grew up in a huge household where I have 9 sisters and brothers, and I was the second oldest. And so I grew up in a group, and I also grew up around other big families because we were very heavily involved in church. And I kind of embodied Saturn in the group because I was like one of the oldest, and so it fell on my shoulders to like take responsibility for the younger kids. That's how I felt. Because Jupiter is my chart ruler, this was something that in some way, shape, or form I pushed off. So this is, again, it's kind of just like true to my subjective experience that I had to take on all this responsibility, because I did have an older sister, and between the two of us, it really wasn't my reputation to be the more like responsible one. From the outside looking in, and most people saw the fire part of me, which was the more rebellious side, which was the more individual side, which was a side where I was like, I cannot, and I think this has to do with my South Node being in the 6th, where the 6th is the sign of service, is when I was expected to serve. It was like at a certain point in my life, I was like, I cannot do this. I literally cannot do this. I cannot meet the demands of what's being asked of me, like to serve other people. I have to let go. I have to not do these things for other people, for so many reasons that I can't even like go into. But kind of like letting go of like my South Node comfort level or ability. It's like kind of like I saw all that was needed and all that was being asked of me, but like this part in me that like kind of like recognized my South Node for the South Node, recognize it, but realize that like that's not what I'm here to do. Like I'm not here to sacrifice myself to serve in such a way that it makes me sick, in a way that it depletes me, which is like something that the sixth house is so associated with. Is just serving to the point of like draining yourself, which is why this is considered the house of illness in Hellenistic astrology, as well as the house of work, because this is where we work so hard we make ourselves sick. And I can't do that. So kind of like having those, taking on responsibility and taking care of my younger siblings and all the other kids I was expected to take care of. Yes, I did do those things, but at a certain point I had to put a boundary up and be like, I can't do this. You know, like I'm only 11. I can't be a parent to 7 children. You know, I mean, it was really kind of unreasonable what was expected of me. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Life's not fair. Like this was the situation I was put in. So, so when we talk about Saturn, that's kind of like one of the things, one of the early ways that I experienced this. Saturn also has to do with control. And one thing that I noticed that I did with groups was like kind of like control the group. So I kind of had like, because I have also Uranus in this chart, it's kind of like this is where I'm experiencing, you know, my uniqueness, but because that was like so inaccessible to me when I was younger, it was like I really just I couldn't conform to the group, and so I would try to control the group because I couldn't conform to what the group needed me to be, or was expecting me to be. Like I basically couldn't handle, I mean, like I'm a double Leo, like I have to be individual. I have to be, I mean, Leo wants control. Leo wants, yes, responsibility, but also power and autonomy. And so this came out to play with my Capricorn in the 11th house, where for a long time I would like try to control the group. So from a very young age, I was like the one that would like orchestrate and host like social events. And I was the one, I was kind of like the networking one that would like bring different people in my lives together. So I would kind of like matchmake, but matchmake in more of like a group sense. So I was definitely the one that was like responsible for and like controlling my social life and also the social life of other people. So that's another way that this plays out. But like when you look at this as a malefic, I really didn't fit into the religious group that I was part of, and I did experience a lot of rejection from my friends, which is like a whole nother story. But basically, I ended up experiencing rejection from my friend group and also from the religion that I was part of. And this was like really, 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 really hard for me. And so for a while, the way Saturn manifested itself in my chart was that I didn't associate with groups. I just avoided anything that was group oriented or like, you know, like a shared identity of sorts. It was kind of like, you know, I came out as queer and I didn't want to be part of the LGBTQ community because like early on when I did come out like as queer, then I experienced rejection and peer pressure to conform within the LGBTQ group. So I was just like, no, this is not what I'm here for. I'm not here for this peer pressure. I'm not here for being rejected or being bullied, which is what I experienced so much in group dynamics. And I'm not trying to, you know, I reached a point where I was like, I'm not trying to control others and I'm not trying to control other people's identity. And so I just don't want to like even engage in like group activity or group identity because it's just screwed up in my experience. So for a while, that was how Saturn manifested itself, was just like not engaging. Saturn was just basically saying no to the topic of groups for a while. So then we also have Saturn is opposing Jupiter over here, which is in conjunction with the sun. So one thing that I'm experiencing now with Saturn is Saturn teaching me Capricorn things in the topic of getting to the goals that I want. Because I've needed so much freedom in my life, it's kind of like, like I said, I've quickly uprooted myself and started over many times. And this has not allowed me to reap the rewards of like having a plan and taking the steps and being consistent with something. And like, because for a long time I didn't even know what I wanted, and I really needed the space for that. But it's kind of like now the last couple of years I've been kind of like settling into like more what do I want for my life. And now I'm like, okay, like this is kind of like a new skill of like how to get there, you know, because for a while Saturn quote unquote oppressed me as representing hard structures and boundaries that restricted me, that I really needed to like break free from. And you know, Jupiter over here is my chart ruler, just wanted to like expand and grow and like come to know myself and come to know the world without these sort of like rigid rules of religion, or without these rigid rules of like society or my peers or my partner, or you know, marriage, or like any sort of commitment for so long just felt restrictive and confining and oppressive. And then now it's kind of like where I'm at a point where like I want to reap the rewards of like making a commitment to something long term and seeing the effects of that. So that's kind of more of like one of the positive ways that Saturn, I hope positive ways of like Saturn is going to teach me kind of like how to work with my energy, because my energy is very fluid and chaotic, and everything that it seems that I come across that talks about how to get to long-term goals, it's so structured that I'm just like, I know for a fact, you know, like working in healthcare and having eating disorders, I know that like an over amount of structuring, an over amount of rigidity is not effective. It just leads to self-hatred. It just leads to, because you're expecting yourself to like conform to these like rigid like steps, and that's not the way that it works. So trying to figure out that balance of like sticking with a plan, keeping my eye on the prize, but also like not overly restricting myself, or being too hard on myself. This is a balance, and oppositions, which is this right here, what I'm having between Saturn and Jupiter here. Oppositions are balances. There's the little line. They teach us to learn balance. We saw that in another chart. So this is something that I'm currently learning. And Saturn is right here at the end of Aquarius, and is actually going into conjunction with my ascendant. So this is what I have to look forward to, is really like taking on those responsibilities, and sort of like learning and embodying and internalizing and assimilating the qualities of Saturn, which I haven't at this point up into my life. When I had my Saturn return, by the way, that was when I was saying no to groups and was having to isolate. I was really leaning into, then as Saturn was applying to my North Node, that was when I really learned to be alone. Okay, so then we talk about my greatest benefic. Let's switch the color here just for fun. Here we go. Here she is. This is Venus. Now, I will say, if Venus is symbolizing resources and love, and Venus is doing the most good in my life, heck yeah, I can attest to that, because I feel like I have been so lucky in love, like with partners, with even people that I dated on a short-term basis, because this is in the 5th house. I like the people that have been in my life, I'm like on good terms / friends with like all of my exes. All of them have been like wonderful people. The partner that I currently have is like to die for, just treats me so well. I'm so happy. So I would say like 100%. I mean, that's not to say that I haven't had some hardships. You know, I've been through divorce, I've been through breakups, but like none of it was because I was being abused, or because I was being like treated so poorly, or none of it was like traumatic or chaotic. Like some of it, I guess, was kind of chaotic, but none of it was really traumatizing. I haven't had really like heavily dysfunctional issues and relationships, and I feel very blessed, and I feel like Venus is doing a really good job, and Venus is capable of doing a really good job in my life, because she is in the 5th house, which has to do with creativity, and that's where Venus really wants to be. And Venus is also exalted in the sign of Cancer, so this is like a really, really good placement for Venus. Now Venus is being overcome by Mars, and Mars is one of my malefics. And it's basically because this is a sextile, this is an opportunity. Mars is an opportunity for cutting off, and that is accurate to my experience because I've had a lot of lovers and I've had a lot of love in my life, but Mars has frequently broken, basically symbolized itself in the breaking of those relationships, which ultimately was for my own good because I really needed to not meld my identity with somebody else. I really needed to find myself first because being in relationships and not knowing who I was really at the root of like basically all of my relationship issues. So what else can I tell you? Venus symbolizing resources. So Venus is also the ruler of my shared house of resources. And I think that we can take credit for the things that we've worked, and I've always worked. I've worked since I was like 12 years old to make money. I had to pay for my own. High school, and I also had to pay, for my own car, my own gas, and my own clothes as a young child. So I'm not saying that I haven't worked for the things that I have, but I would say when it comes to the topic of money and shared resources, I've also been very lucky. My primary partners, the ones that I've like actually lived with and more shared resources with, they've always been very generous when it comes to finances. With me, they've always been somewhat stable and financially responsible, and we've always been able to have savings. There's been times where I like took out student loans, but like at least I got those student loans. But other than the times that I was living on student loans, I really haven't, and I paid those loans off within like a year. I really haven't had debt. I really haven't had to experience what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. I've most of my life been able to like do really well with not having a ton of money, but having enough to get me through the next 2 months or something like that at all times. So it's just kind of like Venus is also really, really helpful to me there. And part of that is because I've had partners that treat me favorably when it comes to their finances as well. So there is that. And then Venus is also ruling Taurus, which is the sign that this is the skills that this is my money and the skills that I have to monetize is in the sign of Taurus. So, that is just also indicating, yes, I have really hustled. I have really taken initiative in order to make money as well. And that was something that I didn't even notice about myself. My mom was the one that actually noticed about me. She's like, I'm so amazed that you just like go after things. And I think that has to do with the second house of resources that we have to monetize. So Aries as a second house, it's like you don't take a lot with you when Aries is your second house of resources. Like I said, I've never had huge amounts of investment. I've never owned a home. I've never had like a huge stock investment in the market or anything like that. For the majority of my life, I've been able to fit everything that I own into a car, my car, some old car. Like I've never had a nice car, but I've always had a car that works. So just having a car that works, having a car that was paid off, being able to fit everything that I own into one car. This is very Aries because the value here is basically being able to be like light on your feet, being able to like move around, being able to like take initiative and go after what you want because you're not bogged down, you're not tied down by like financial commitments. So that's been like a major priority for me in life. And part of the reason why I haven't had to worry too much about money is because I haven't made major financial commitments, right? So by minimizing my expenses, I don't have children. That helps too because I don't have that financial commitment or that restriction on what I'm able to do. So there's just a lot of my priorities have been on keeping things light and keeping things simple and being a minimalist, which is quite different than my partner who like loves luxury. And I do not understand luxury. I do not understand the appeal of brand names. I do not understand why somebody would spend a lot of money on a car. My ideal home is like a house made of mud. So I'm very minimalist in that instance. And that is another reason why I've been able to, I feel like, be lucky when it comes to resources because I'm just also keeping my expenses minimal. But okay, so then when we talk about the I mean, I think that's actually pretty good. Like, there's so much more I could say. Like, my midheaven is in Sagittarius. Obviously, like, I love to teach. The ruler of that is in the 5th house, which is Jupiter. And a lot of people look at my chart and they think, like, that I must have a lot of children. Because I have both my benefics in the 5th house as the ruler of my 10th house. Cancer is the sign of the mother. It makes sense that I would have children. But the thing is that Venus is also the ruler of my 3rd house of children. And the thing is that I have many, many siblings that are younger than me that, like I said earlier, I was involved in taking care of them. And so, I was surrounded by children growing up. So the topic of children, and then I was a nanny for a number of years. So I invested in the lives of children in that way as well. And now my partner has kids. And so I do my best to be a positive influence in their lives. So even though I've literally never even gotten pregnant, so which would maybe be surprising, but I guess that's also sort of benefic because I was never intending to get pregnant. And sometimes what benefics do is they give us what we want. So if we don't want to have children, if we don't want to get pregnant, then we're probably not going to get pregnant if I have both my benefics in that house, and has been my desire for a long time, right? Was to not have children, so I never did. But nonetheless, children have been a substantial topic in my life, as well as being connected to my house of career because I was a nanny for so long. And then when we also get into career, like when we look at Sagittarius, when you look at Jupiter being the planet that's associated with my career, what's so interesting is that I have worked with women, and I also have Chiron here. So remember, Chiron is where we heal other people because of wounding that we have. So my mother had cancer for the majority of her life. She battled cancer, it came back multiple times. And it was breast cancer, which is definitely associated with cancer. Cancer is associated with the breast. Obviously, the word is cancer. I feel like that's not a coincidence. And when I went into the healthcare field, I went into a field that I could have been put in so many different positions, but ended up being put in GYN, and I ended up getting like a lot of breast cases. And so I was working on removing cancer tumors from women who had breast cancer, and also like ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, and all that kind of stuff. So it seemed like I just got like thrown into this area where like Jupiter is my chart ruler, but also there's Chiron there. So it's kind of like I'm healing people in an area that like I've experienced like a whole lot of pain myself. And also too, as a bi-gender person, gender fluid person, somebody who struggled with a lot of gender dysphoria, a lot of that was top dysphoria. So that was also indicated by Chiron in the sign of the breast. So I had a lot of top dysphoria, and I ended up working at Victoria's Secret, which there you go is Leo, my 2nd house. So this is about the image. This is about Venus. This is about pleasure, luxury, feeling good in your own skin. And anyway, so there's a lot of reasons why I would end up working at Victoria's Secret, but I ended up being put in the bra department. It could have been perfume. It could have been Pink, the like brand, because the stores were combined at that time that I was working there. But no, I was put in bras, and I became the bra specialist, and so ended up being like the supervisor for the bra team, and I ended up helping a lot of women get into bras that fit them well and helping them feel comfortable and confident in an area where I didn't. And so it's just really, that was just a lot of Chiron there playing itself out in my chart. But anyway, I could go on and on because obviously this is a chart that I've done so much looking into. But I think I've probably already spent a ton of time on this, but I hope that gives you kind of some ideas as well of how things play out in a chart and how to kind of like interpret a chart. So yes, I hope that really helps as, like I said, kind of a starting point for interpretation. This is not something, when you go to interpret your own chart, it's going to take so much time. You're always going to be finding new things about yourself, new expressions of your chart. You're going to be learning to work with these planets. You're going to be learning to work with these energies. And just keep in mind, like, as I was explaining about how these malefics have played out in my life, like, a lot of the time it's been me acting as the the malefic planet or the benefic planet, or I've had, like with Saturn, sometimes I've had these boundaries there for a reason. Even when I was rejected by groups, it was like, it was important. It wasn't just me, for a while it was like me saying no to the group, but before that it was being rejected from the group by other people. But I needed to have that experience in order to, like, find my North Node calling, which was like learning to be alone, like learning to really get to know, like, who I am, and learning to detach from my ego and stop, like, just conforming to the expectations of other people. So I think it's a helpful way to look at malefic experiences, is just to see, like, even if you don't view it from the perspective of, like, this is a lesson I need to learn and these planets are here to teach me that, if you look at it in a way of, like, what's the positive that came out of this experience? What's the best possible way that I could spin this in order to, like, grow myself into a person that's, like, happier with who I am and happier with my life, and feeling more confident and feeling more empowered to, like, make decisions and having control over your life. I think it's just something that is so valuable with astrology, and that I'm hoping to give you guys by having you guys take this course, and the people that are interested in taking this course. I really hope that you get value out of it, and I really hope that this is something that empowers you with self-knowledge, and empowers you with understanding energies around you and making sense of your experiences. And maybe you're going to internalize it and come up with a different philosophy than me, and that's fine. My wish for you, my hope for you is that that this helps you in some way. And if something that I'm saying doesn't resonate or doesn't help you, please, by all means, like, let it go, because that is not my intent at all. My intent is not to cause someone to feel trapped or to push my belief system onto any of you guys. My intention here is to empower you guys to get to know yourselves. As a Leo person, this has been a big part of my journey, and this is something that I'm wanting to give to you guys, is the gift of getting to know yourself and being compassionate with yourself. Like, as a Pisces rising, I was so compassionate with other people, but it's become so hard to be compassionate for yourself. But you have to be able to not attack yourself. You have to be able to compassionately say, like, hey, these are the cards that I was dealt, and I did the best that I could, and I learned these coping mechanisms, and you know what, like, there's pluses and minuses of that situation, and how can I free myself from the limiting factors, and how can I make the best out of the situation that I am? How can I make the best out of the cards that I've been dealt? Because in a lot of ways, your chart is representing the cards that you've been dealt, because you're born with this chart, right? And whether you believe that you chose this, that your soul chose this chart before you got here, or what have you, like, once you're here, and in some way, shape, or form, that's 100% true to all of us. Like, we've just been given this chart, and we didn't, we're not actively picking these pieces and saying, like, this is what I want. Like, oh, I want to have an eating disorder. I want to be rejected by my friends. Like, I want, whatever it is that some of your struggles are. I want my mom to die of cancer. Like, nobody's thinking those things. Like, these are just things that happen to you. Like, if we don't have compassion for ourselves, if we don't love ourselves, and if we're not willing to accept whatever we find when we look at ourselves, and then we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to make progress. We're not going to grow. We're not going to free ourselves from pain and suffering. I hope that astrology gives you a tool for self-knowledge and self-empowerment and making the best of your life. Okay, guys, and that is it. I hope those examples helped, and I really am glad that you guys have made it through this whole series with me. I'm super proud of you guys. Please also keep in mind that you can book with me for a analysis where we go over everything that you've learned, where we interpret a chart together, that will earn you a certificate of completion. You can book it on my website at charliestar.com. But regardless, I'm just so happy that you guys have taken advantage of this effort that I've put in to share some of the things that I know about chart interpretation with you. I still feel like even after the last couple of months that we've barely scratched the surface on this topic, this is just the jumping off point, and there's so many ways that you can go from here. Medical astrology, evolutionary astrology, you can look into past life and karma, you can even start looking into like Vedic astrology, you can look into different house systems, you can delve into compatibility and composite charts, which is something that I've been looking into a lot. Forecasting, I absolutely love, I've been doing for so long. All of these are things that you can do with the birth chart, but this is just so foundational to understanding astrology at its starting point, and it's revolutionary enough on its own. So I hope it's been really helpful for you guys. Please feel free to like leave in the comments below, like some of you guys have done so far in the course, just like some feedback about what's helpful or not helpful for you in the videos, and what you'd like to see more of, because I will of course still be producing videos for you guys, like on the full moons and the new moons, and at any other time that I see appropriate astrologically. So I also do tarot, so you can also get a tarot reading with me. That's also on my website, and you can also book with me. Currently, you can book with me at Crescent Moon on Fridays, and that's in Tacoma, Washington. We still didn't get to cover like a fully, detailed interpretation of each chart, but I just tried to, take some of the basics of the chart and stay consistent with that interpretation, and that can be an amazing starting point for you guys as well. And thank you to all the people that volunteered for me to use their charts, even though I did use the charts anonymously. I was still sharing a lot of personal information about people and putting that online, so I really appreciate their permission for using their charts. Hope you had a good time with this course. I really had a good time with it, and I'll see you on the next moon video. Thank you so much for watching.